Hello, all. We have started the space. I've sent out the usual requests for attendance to our friends, but still, because of the way this lousy place makes these things work, have a lot of people who I cannot easily communicate with because it only shows me 50 names and it shows me 50 names in alphabetical order. So you are in pretty bad shape unless I spoke to you in the last few days. If your name is anything starting with B or above, it's quite pathetic how terrible this system is. But it's what we got, so I guess we have not much of a choice in the matter. I'm going to see if I can uh, assist with any more of the requests for or invitations. I think that's a lot prettier, an invitation rather than a request, provided that I find names. Ah, come on, do this, please. And there's a few more people I'd like to talk to, but this isn't going to show it to me. Julian, I can't find you. I feel so terrible about this. Uh, I'm going to have to uh, ask for all of my friends to spread the word as best they can. It is Thursday, the 23rd of January. It has been an interesting week, both in climate and in climate science. And of course, if you're here in North America, this has been one of the coldest weeks in the last few years. Not a very cold week. That is the unusual paradox about this is in the past this would have been considered uh, almost normal for this time of year. Instead, obviously, this is relatively cold in comparison. That is what happens when you have and I'm going to accept my own co-host invitation, when you have a climate that is in such dramatic levels of change, in very, very high uh, rates of change. So today we are going to talk about some of the aspects of the differentials between the Arctic region, the area just below the Arctic to the Tropic of Cancer, also known as the subarctic or the temperate zone, and of course the rest of the world. And I will have a couple of charts to put up later on that shows how the Arctic has warmed up over the last 60 years at four times, actually slightly more than four times the rate of global warming for the rest of the planet. And this is why the polar vortex, which essentially used to protect, for the most part, the lower 90% of the planet's surface from the brutal cold that you get this time of year in the perpetual night Arctic, how now those extremely cold temperatures are bleeding out. And we get these gigantic uh, jet streams coming out of the Arctic, in some cases going as far south as the equator and then dropping back up. We will discuss why we have these situations, why they are so potentially troublesome, especially when you have extremely high temperature air coming from the equator when the jet stream drops that far down and forcing its way back up north, which is not rather why this is how we've had in the last several years these extraordinary heat waves in British Columbia that have brutalized the trees, eventually leading to some of the worst fires in British Columbia history and the highest temperatures in Canadian history, which you would not expect from Lytton, British Columbia, but that is because these new extremely energetic jet streams are going much further south than they have in the past, only to return back north with high energy, high temperature wind. There's a lot of things we're going to talk about today. I have a couple of rants that I want to introduce because I am constantly reminded by people on Twitter that the level of intelligence of science deniers is extraordinarily insufficient. These are people who I think if you put them into a maze would never come out alive. It is startling that they can even function in the real world, but people prefer comfortable their comfortable falsehoods for working and learning. It's a problem that we can't do much about, uh, but we can try here to uh, inject a little bit of knowledge, a little bit of understanding, some reason, and hopefully some entertainment. Uh, Kim, if you're with me, I'm I hate how I'm always having issues with the invite, and I tried to invite Julian, I couldn't. So drop him a note, tell him we'd love to have him here. I think I dropped Oliver a note, and most of the usual suspects.
Okay, good morning. I did drop him a note, and also Oliver. So hopefully, they'll be showing up momentarily. How are you today?
I've had a good morning, although my toes are a little cold. Uh,
Okay. How's
uh,
Blue doing and the rest of the gang?
he is right now upstairs with Stripe. Stripe is our 15-pound half Maine Coon cat who, for want of a better word, is the most social butterfly you will ever meet in your life. Every cat and human loves him. And as a result, a lot of times he just draws crowds. So wherever he stays, you'll have other cats.
That's nice. That I do. I've met a few cats like that. They're always around your legs, purring away. Please pet me. Is that his personality?
His personality is more forceful in some respects. He will just simply sit down on the bed or the couch, or he'll just throw himself on your lap and he'll say, "All right, deal with me." He's he's exceptionally beautiful. Uh, and I think even cats have a thing for beauty. I think they see a beautiful cat and they get wowed by them too, just like we do. So I think a lot of that is because he is so beautiful that a lot of cats come to him. But he's also just, whoa, what do I have on my desk here? Is that a stink bug this time of year? I'm going to have to do something about that. I did not expect to see. Wow, that is amazing. Where did you come from this time of year? Yes, the insect
I
world
Is that
still.
like a beetle? Is that
Yes,
like a? I have those. They only
this
come
this
into my house somehow from December to like March.
this is a true bug. Bugs are different than, well, they are insects, but uh, to be a bug, you have to earn your living by sucking on plants. So this is a bug. It's a
Okay,
very,
well,
very,
I
it's
do
a,
have a few plants, and I do notice that this bug is usually around them.
I don't know what to do with this guy because I don't really want to kill him. I don't really want to kill this thing, but at the same time, it's like I don't have any food for him, and I'm certainly not going to let him just kill my houseplants. Ah, houseplants. I'm going to have to deal with that soon. I didn't mention to you that we did a what's the date code on this thing? 11/28. So on 11/28, we planted basil, thyme, parsley, and sage. Well, yeah, actually, you have some sage here, and some parsley and basil. We are always growing some sorts of herbs. The problem is we never eat the parsley fast enough. Parsley is an amazing plant. It grows recklessly. So it's going to eventually become the star of any garden, but it also grows very, very quickly. So if you grow parsley, make sure you eat it. Uh,
Well,
uh,
you've got to put it on top of everything, though. Kind of like how, fine dining was in the 80s, right? Everything had parsley attached to it or on the side of it.
it's a
I've
darn it,
I
you're not
only
supposed to eat it.
I have only one recipe which directly calls for parsley. They're carrot fritters, which are very good. Everyone loves them. I don't know how nutritious they are though because I deep fry them. So, but that calls for like I think 5 tablespoons of parsley all chopped up with shallots, and of course the carrots and thyme would be the herb that I use for it.
I am prepping my drink for today. Um, Today's drink is not a coffee. It is matcha tea. I do I do a lot of matcha also, even though I'm more well known for the coffees that I drink. Uh, okay, so we have this. Oliver is here.
Good morning, Oliver.
Okay, so rant number one for today, which has pissed me off no end. The first rant is, oh, plants need CO2 as food, and then the plants. Hello,
Hi
Oliver.
everyone.
The plant the plants will. I'm doing a rant. The plants will turn that CO2 into oxygen for us to breathe. But here's the problem. If you take I mentioned earlier, I did a little post on this, that the two most common uh, long chains in gasoline are pentane and heptane. And if you're going to turn those two into CO2, it's going to take you 35 atoms, so 17 and a half molecules of O2, which will give you 11 molecules of CO2, which will eventually be taken by plants to give you 11 molecules of O2. So you got 17 and a half molecules in of O2, and you're getting 11 molecules of O2 back out. So wait a second. Isn't combustion reducing the amount of oxygen in the environment? It's it also does increase the amount of water a little bit, but I don't think the Earth has much of a water shortage. So all of these guys are saying we need to burn more hydrocarbons because it creates more CO2, and then there's the plant food. No, we don't need more plant food. We don't need more oxygen. We need to stop burning fossil fuels, which reduces the amount of oxygen in the environment. And it's frustrating because you can't get people to understand this. You can do whatever, you can try to teach them. Nobody knows about chemicals, symbols. Nobody knows about how, the formulas on chemicals and how to make things work. But they're just not going to listen. They are burned in to their doctrines. I mentioned this a long time ago in CCC, that the first thing you have to do if you want to learn anything is you have to forget the things you've learned that are wrong. This is especially true when it comes to skiing. Uh, so you have to you have to unlearn the mistakes, and then and only then can you actually learn what the truths are and how to work these things out in the best possible way. Uh, there is another little note I wanted to start today off with, and some of you know, I told some of you, I didn't tell everybody. I still haven't resolved this with YouTube, but a former member of CCC, he was there only like for the first, I don't know, like week 6 through week 12, going south. He is a extreme anti-Semite and racist, and I don't know why he joined CCC except for the fact that he wanted to infiltrate and uh, spread fear, uncertainty, and doubt. So he took our last week's space and he put it on YouTube. And I was told about that. I'm not going to mention the person who spoke to me about it because I believe in anonymity. If somebody says, "Don't tell anybody I said this," I ain't gonna say it. And I confronted him on YouTube. I'm like, dude, you don't have permission to do this from the people who actually did this. You are playing the voices of people who never allowed this to be broadcast in any other venue. And he's like, well, tough shit. Why did you block me? And I'm like, dude, I blocked you for a reason. If I block somebody, there's typically a very, very good reason for it. And quite a lot of times that reason is sexism, racism, violent tendencies. There are certain things that I cannot, even if you're, in 100% agreement with me on everything else, there are certain unspeakable ills that cannot, I cannot pardon. So there is a possibility, even though I've tried, I told him not to, we blocked him from the from this website, but he can always create another account and follow us and then come in here and listen or listen. He can also listen because we have the recording is out for anybody who wants it. So that's
Right. I mean, he could be recording us right now.
well, he can't. I don't think he can
No.
record us. He could record us, but he can
Yeah.
just simply take the recording and then. And I cannot understand how YouTube. And I told this to YouTube. I said, guys, this is X property. So you have to sign. You have to get X to sign off on this. But I left it unresolved with them. So he claimed that we are spreading disinformation. The funny thing is he never said exactly what was disinformation about it. He just said the whole thing is disinformation. Dude, this is physics. I don't make things up. I don't invent stuff. I I pride myself on always showing my sources, and by telling people if you want to validate everything that I've said here, here's the sources that I use. Here's the methodology that I use to create my charts. Please, you know, do it. Go for it. Oliver.
I've been tracking him as well, like you, and he's a funny chap. He's from Greenland actually, and he's a pro-Trump and very much pro-Trump, and he does a tandem, as you say, with the Climate Club as well, but he also puts it on Rumble. So you've got YouTube, Rumble, and Twitter all together, running the club, the whole club process. This is on the Climate Club, obviously, for the full duration, and it basically attracts quite unpleasant people on the YouTube channel. I have to look in occasionally just to see what's going on, to be honest, and it's not. I didn't like it at all. I don't particularly like him. He does turn up on Sandy's thing as well quite a lot, and he causes quite a lot of mischief there. He winds people up. He gets into rucks with people. All the usual stuff, and that obviously is on YouTube. That's the coffee, the coffee house, environmental coffee house, which is I think Tuesdays and Fridays. I haven't actually been there for the last week or so, so I've just been trying to catch up on sleep. But there you go. He puts it he puts it about a bit anyway. So yeah, and I've always had a bit of a funny feeling about him, like a bit sort of very quite racist, antagonistic, all the usual unpleasant virtues of social media. So just to let you know.
Oliver, by the way, how are you feeling? You fell down, I think last
Oh,
week,
yeah.
and you hurt your back. How are you feeling?
Yeah. I'm recovering. I managed to work yesterday. It was pretty grim, but I managed to recover a little bit. I did a little bit of lifting, nothing heavy, just setting out a form work. But I was very knackered when I got home. Slept for 4 hours as soon as I came in, just crunch. So yeah, but recovering.
That's good to hear. Keep at it. Is
Yeah,
walking helping, like staying active, making
I'm
sure it doesn't tense up?
doing that now, yes. And paracetamol, not paracetamol, I can't take that. The other stuff, the weak, feeble stuff, what's it called? Ibuprofen. That helps a lot, actually.
Okay, right. Do you put like heat on it as well? Like
Well,
a
I
heat
don't,
pack or
not
a
intentionally.
hot water bottle?
Not intentionally, no. But I don't know if it's a hot or a cold thing, but it's doing all right anyway. I think I was lucky, actually. Okay, look, I've got to go in the
Very
chemist
good.
now.
Okay. Take care.
I'm here, don't worry. But
By the way, I am right now. I've already released one chart, and I'm about to release the second one. And the second one that I'm going to release is a three-zonal chart that shows what the differences in temperature change in the last 70 years on the ERA5 analysis, and the rest of the world. I am typing as I'm speaking as I'm typing. It should be up. Well, it should be up now. So there's two charts up there right now. Hello, where is two? I'm going to refresh this and see if it actually is there.
Is the first one the rotational speed of
The
the
first is
Earth?
rotational speed. Where did the second
Okay,
one
that
go?
one's there. Is it in
Did
the
it go to?
purple pill?
It should be, and I didn't see it yet. Does the purple pill have a time delay on it compared to everything else? Uh, so I'm going to check out my other to see if it's there. Yeah, it should be there. It's. I see it on the CE and I. Did I do it as a? There, okay, the second one is up there. So I think the first thing I want to talk about, and you don't actually have to have this in front of you to understand it, but it don't hurt. We have some extraordinary resources available to us for research on
Sorry,
the web.
Sal. Sorry, what's the name of the second one? So I could.
It's ERA5 comparisons for annual zonal temperatures. It might
Okay,
be directly underneath. I may have replied to the
to
first
that
one.
one. Okay, thank
Yeah, it
you.
looks like I replied. It looks like it's a reply to the first one. Didn't intend to do that, but so what this does is we have. Okay, let me go back. We have incredible tools that allow you to. You can literally look at a snapshot of the world in half-degree increments, and not just half-degree latitude, but half-degree longitude. So you could really narrow in if you want to go for small parts of the world. But in this case, it's not small parts. I've broken the world into three pieces: the Arctic, which is from the North Pole to the Arctic Circle; the temperate zone, which is from uh, the Arctic Circle to the Tropic of Cancer; and then the rest of the world, from the Tropic of Cancer to the Antarctic, is another section. And there's reason why that this has frequently been done. But over the last 60 years, the North Pole has gone up a little bit more than 3.6 degrees. The Arctic, rather, has gone up by 3.6 degrees in the last 60 years. Whereas the rest of the world, other than that, has only gone up by a little less than 1 degree. So there is a little bit more than 4-to-1 ratio in temperature changes between the Arctic and the rest of the world. And the our part of the world, I think pretty much everybody here, we don't have anybody from Africa or Australia here yet. Um, Everybody else is in 24 degrees north to 66 degrees north. It's the temperate zone. It's where like 90% of the world's people live. And that has, really, and almost everyone, the global north. And that has gone up twice as fast as the rest of the world. A lot of it is because the world is really weirdly shaped. I think I've mentioned this before that there's only a handful of places, even though roughly 30% of the land on planet Earth, 30% of planet Earth is land. If you were to stick a pole from where you are right now through the center of the Earth and have it come out the other end, assuming you are on land right now, it is almost impossible for you to hit land. Now, you would think theoretically it should be roughly a 30% chance. If it's 30% of the planet is land, then you should have a 30% chance, which means essentially any pole anywhere on planet Earth should have a 10% chance of passing through land on both sides. The reality is it's less than 1%. It's it's one of those amazing coincidences that there are very, very few places on Earth that are antipodal to Earth, to land. And because of this weirdness, with most of the land in the world is in the northern hemisphere, most of the water in the world is in the southern hemisphere, uh, creates this very weird planetary thermal environment. Even more weird when you think about it, that right now, for the next like 7,000 years, we're in an environment where the hottest time of the year, when the Earth is closest to the sun, is in austral summer. So this is the time of year because most of the sunlight is hitting water, and water takes a lot longer to warm up than land does. That this is the time of the year where this is the time of the cycle where the Earth should be cooling. If we only look at natural climate uh, events, forcings, changes, this should be a cooling phase for planet Earth. Not a significant one, not enough for glaciation, but yes, it should be cooling. Instead, we're seeing the highest and fastest rise versus run this planet has ever seen in any era where we had enough um, resolution and accuracy to make these claims. And to put this into perspective, we haven't seen the Earth warm up 1/10 as rapidly as it is doing right now. That only happened 122,000 years ago, and we think probably in the PETM about 60 million years ago, something like this happened as well. So this is a strange new world. And
Oh, one thing
you know
I
why?
would, Sal, I just want to add about the warming. A stat that I saw that really I think about it once a day now. In the last 20 years, the temperature increase, global average mean temperature, has gone up by zero point 0.8 degrees, because it used to be
It's
at 0.08, and now it's at 1.6, right? Or zero point 0.8, sorry, I should say. C.
it is startling. Yeah, how it's and and the funny thing is, and this is again, this is why I put that chart up today. We are seeing the world getting much hotter, much faster than it's ever done before. But the Arctic has actually seen a temperature decline since 2016. And it's very hard to reconcile, although, to be honest, when we do talk about long range temperature, we shouldn't, looking at things from year to year is difficult. And it looks like the reason that the Arctic is cooling down is because so much ice has been lost, especially from Greenland and the sea ice, that it is flooding the area, literally flooding the area, with cold, fresh water. Water
Right. So
loves
that
to,
it's kind of like right now it's the ice cube in the glass. It's
yes,
cooling the water around it, right?
yes.
Okay. Thank you.
So we have this very unusual circumstance where when you melt an ice cube, it takes about a little bit less than 80 calories per gram to turn that 0 degree ice cube into 0 degree water. So you haven't cooled it down. It's the temperature has remained the same, but the latent heat inside of that ice cube has shot up. It's not an ice cube anymore. It's now water. So the latent heat of fusion, the amount of energy it takes to turn ice to water without changing the temperature of that water, is as much as it would take to turn that water from 0 degrees centigrade to a little bit less than 80 degrees centigrade. So you're 4/5 of the way to boiling, and that's the energy just to melt that ice cube. So we have lost trillions of liters of ice, turned that into water in from Greenland. Sea ice is also a spectacular amount. And one of these days I'll calculate the exact number, and I'll probably have a heart attack when I see what it is. How much energy has gone to convert the cryosphere ice, frozen world, into the ocean. This is also happening in Antarctica, but I've always said this. If you look at climate data for the last 200 years from the southern hemisphere, from Antarctica, Antarctica is literally from another planet. It is. They also have a polar vortex, but they have an interesting polar vortex in that the Antarctic Ocean and the Southern Ocean that surrounds Antarctica essentially acts like a gigantic insulator. So whatever whatever happens in Antarctica stays in Antarctica. So it insulates the rest of the planet from Antarctic changes. And right now, Antarctica is calving off icebergs like nobody's business. It is losing a spectacular amount of energy, although some years it's a little bit less, some years it's a little bit more. It when it breaches, when it finally goes into oh my God status, Antarctica is going to be capping off not just glaciers, but small European nation chunks of ice. Oliver.
Just on the melt, on the mostly the Arctic melt. Jim's very good. Jim Massa. I don't know if you follow him at all. He's pretty laid back for a scientist, but he's pretty good on he's pretty good on the oceanographic stuff. He's very good on the melt, particularly on this idea that it takes a bulk flush of water. This is picking up a lot of how can I put it? Other people are sort of tuning into this idea that if the oh God, what's it called? The Gaia, the Beaufort Gaia in the Arctic should suddenly switch around and release the meltwater that it's trapping in the Arctic, then that could be a very strong potential trigger for amok, for example. That it's just the amount of fresh water that's being released, literally from a Gaia, or a gear. And the same could be said for if there was a gigantic lake that suddenly collapsed and flooded the whole area. That might that's done it in the past, he reckons, and it could do it in the future. And I suppose you're yeah, go on, yeah.
And I'm gonna and I was as you were talking about this, I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna have to talk about this.
Yes, it's a fascinating subject, isn't it? I mean,
Uh,
it captured me.
the Younger Dryas, about
Ah, yeah.
14,000 years ago. We don't know what caused it, but there was a gigantic ice dam. As glaciers retreat, sometimes what happens is that the glaciers essentially, the northernmost terminus of the glacier is solid ice. Uh, we're talking Game of Thrones wall of ice. But on the other side of that wall of ice is a lake. It is a massive lake. We had in the center of the United States. We had one of the greatest, greatest lakes in history. And that lake, when the ice exploded, when the ice finally broke through, the water that would typically have flown south into the Mississippi River Delta flowed north into the St. Lawrence, and it chunked out the Great Lakes. So this is like the most important. You look at North America on a map, it's like the first thing you practically see. Maybe Hudson Bay is the first thing you see. The second thing you see are the Great Lakes. There's these gigantic water bodies in the middle of nowhere. And they were created by the ice dam ripping through uh, literally, trillions of liters of water going downhill, carving out these spectacular lakes, but sending that water through the St. Lawrence instead of sending it down south. And that flushed so much freezing water into the North Atlantic that the Northern Hemisphere for about 1,500 years had a mini ice age. And that's the Younger Dryas period of about 14,000 years ago. The rest of planet Earth was warming up. The rest of planet Earth was doing great. North America and the Northern Hemisphere were back in a tiny little temporary freeze. And this is also pretty much concurrent to when the Clovis people came over from Beringia to settle North America. So it's fascinating because just after this, you had the megafauna extinctions where we lost North America's camels, North America's horses, native horses. We lost the saber-toothed tiger. I don't know what sort of environmental impact that had, but it's just it's an iconic, very very charismatic species, the saber-toothed tiger, and we also lost the woolly mammoths. So everything big except for us pretty much died.
It reminds me of Ice Age, the animated movie. I love those movies actually. But my daughter wanted me to tell everyone that she was reading on some social media feed that Niagara Falls has frozen over.
I've always wanted to see
Me
that, but my
too.
wife is afraid of the cold.
Actually, I think I went when I was really young. And I think it would look amazing. But yeah, it's been cold enough that it froze over this year.
I've been looking at the Hudson, and the Hudson has some very small islands of ice. I am um, 20 miles away from the mouth of the Hudson, 30 kilometers from the mouth of the Hudson. I quite, I can't see the Hudson because there's houses blocking me. So if I go on the street and walk 100 meters, I can see the Hudson River. It is stunning. It is beautiful. Uh, I was wondering how far the ice would go this year because this is in the last like 4 days we have never been above freezing, and I was wondering if it would be enough for it to trigger uh, ice flows, not solid ice, but at least serious ice flows. And tomorrow I'm probably gonna go about 20 kilometers north of here for a walk, and I want to see if the Hudson that far north has significant ice. But if you go back um, 35 years, the Hudson would every like 3 or 4 years it would freeze solid. And if you go back 70 or 80 years, every year practically it would freeze solid. Uh, uh, this is now a once a decade occurrence.
Right. I guess it's going to lend itself to one of the topics of the space today. Is it the polar vortex, or is it the polar jet stream that's leading to these colder temperatures? But here in Canada, we have in Ottawa the Rideau Canal, which last year did not open because it didn't get cold enough. But this year, I think it has been operating for about a week or two, and it looks frozen solid.
I think you're forcing me to
No, 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 continue
to,
on.
to,
It was very interesting what you were
no, no,
talking
yeah,
about, but
no. But I'm saying what you're forcing me to send another tweet out, uh, and I'm gonna do the Doom Watch for January, which is my the Doom Watch happens every month or during the year, and I show how this year or this month compares to others. And this is the January 2025 Doom Watch. And I'm not going to put any more text on it. I'm just going to leave it at that, and I'm going to send it out to the cloud. So right now on the jumbotron, if you want to see it, the Doom Watch, it shows the ERA5 daily anomalies for January 2024 versus January 2025. And we are 21 days in of data to the ERA5. And right now, we are more than 1/10 of a degree average for the month hotter than January 2024 was. And I don't mean for this time of the year. We're actually a degree at 1.15 degrees higher. January, I don't like what I did on the chart there. That looks a little filthy. I'm going to have to fix that. I'm always commenting on my work. So you can see that the last 10 days of January 2024 was a gigantic pulse of warmth. We aren't going to get that. We're actually going to have the opposite. But there is no question, if I look at this data so far, there is no question that January 2025 is going to be, at least on ERA5 and on NOAA's NCEP, SLFC. It's like 47 letters in this thing. That's why I can't ever remember it. It's like you might as well use it as a call. You know what? If you ever need a password, just look at NOAA's uh, description of this data set, use it as a password. Nobody will ever get it.
that's funny. You mean yours isn't collapse 2030 or
So that database, I'll draw attention to that later, but I don't really because it's not the best. The NCEP reanalysis is not the best out there. But that said, they have they're able to predict in advance. Julian, I keep on trying to find to call you and to invite you, and the damn software never lets me do it. So I'm apologizing, but at the same time, I'm frustrated. Anyway,
I
I
did
didn't see you
it.
before. Hello. Thank you very much. Uh, they do a data release every 6 hours for what the climate is going to look like for the next 168 hours globally. These are projections, these are models. But that said, they're pretty damn good. They have so far for this month, what is this? This is day number 30. This is day number 30, model number 2. So there's 122 models. The 122 predictions that they have generated so far for this month are off by an average of 1/20th of a degree C. So that's pretty damn accurate. And that's, some months are better, some months are worse. Anyway, so there's only 6 more points remaining, 6 more sample runs, and then there will be corrections. That's why I never released this until I will release this on January 31st at 7 p.m. because that's when everything has come in and it's no longer based on a model and it's based on actual data. They are right now about 0.57 degrees, 0.057 degrees warmer than January 2024. There's no way in the universe short of asteroid Apophis coming in and striking the Earth, and that's not going to happen until 2029. There's no way that 2025 is going to be January 2025 is going to be colder than January 2024. Now, this is an El Nino year. Sorry, a La Nina year. Don't know why I made that mistake. La Ninas are typical uh, zero point 0.1 to zero point 0.2 degrees colder than El Ninos. So this should never have been the warmest January on record. It just absolutely should never have been. But it is. So this is one of those amazing circumstances where the world is screwed up.
Well, and this is why it's on your doom watch, right?
That's why I call it the Doom Watch. Yes, because these are things you would never have expected. You would not anticipate that January 25 would be warmer than January 24.
Well,
obviously, we have no.
Also, in the States, with all that cold weather that people are getting,
Yes.
People might be thinking, oh, well, it's going to be a colder January on one of the, right?
Yeah.
But
bear in mind, the United States is 1.58% of the world's total surface. So it's really just a
right, because we have to look at the entire globe.
But there are people who are always going online telling me, yeah, but my city is cold, so the rest of the world must be cold too.
Humans can only understand 20 feet in front of them.
I think a lot of people just are looking for excuses to deny reality. And there's nothing you can do about that. People are really bad with reality. I've mentioned this several times before. I might as well just briefly touch upon it. In ancient Athens, this is, since there's no Greek here to tell you these stories, I have to do it. In ancient Athens, you had the skeptics. And the whole idea of skepticism, the movement was people who did not believe in the gods. They thought, this is crazy. You got these hundreds of gods hanging out doing business. So what they did was they investigated. I know it's hard to investigate gods because you really can't, but they investigated the literature and they studied the documents and the histories of their culture. And they knew as much about their culture and their literature and the philosophy than the proponents of the people who believed in the gods. So the true skeptics, the ancient skeptics, were not just they weren't cynics and they weren't naysayers. They weren't just, well, if you believe this, I can't believe this. They were people who, from start to finish, they wanted to know what was going on in the world. That was their desire, to learn as much as possible. And modern skeptics are the exact opposite. They don't want to learn. So when people tell me, well, you're supposed to read both sides, and I say, yeah, I do. I read the bloody Ned Nicola bullshit. I read the Zarkova craziness. I read all of their papers. I'm laughing at the time, I'm saying to myself, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong. But I read them because you have to know what people think. You have to know, and you have to break them down and you have to find out exactly, all right, this is where they get it wrong. This is where they make fundamental mistakes. But the skeptics don't want to do that. They want to curate information only that agrees with them. So they don't learn the physics. They don't learn the math. They don't learn. All they're doing in their research is they're just searching for confirmation bias. They're looking for ideas that support their preconceptions, and they are not trying to learn. And that is why I view these modern skeptics with so much disrespect and scowl. And it's even worse. I mean, climate is one thing, but then there are the anti-vaxxers and the 3 or 4% of humanity that thinks that the Earth is flat, and the whatever it is, 15% who think the moon landings never happened, and the ones who think that 9/11 was an inside job and that you can't. We'll have to do that one of these days too. You can't melt steel with jet fuel. You don't have to melt steel with jet fuel. You just have to make it soft enough that you reach the plasticity temperature of steel, and then you don't have to melt the steel. It will just simply bend itself out of recognition. So it's just this modern failure of instead of having a desire to learn about the world, they want to just, you know, whatever it is, I'm against it, which comes from Groucho Marx, the movie Duck Soup, 1929, 1930. I used to be a big fan of the Marx Brothers. I guess I still am. It's just that, you know, in the modern world, we expect our dramas and our musicals to have 47,000 things happening at the same time. So, so slow drama and slow comedy are out of vogue.
Well, I think
Uh,
if you watched any TV in the 1970s, you watched the Marx Brothers, right? I mean, those were the movies that were on a Saturday afternoon on the like 5 channels that you had.
I do remember in, I think it was like 1979, when they played for the first time in 50 years Animal Crackers. It was not it was a hidden Marx Brothers movie. I mean, you had the big 7 or 8, and you had a few that just weren't as good. But yeah, the Marx Brothers, you know, that sort of comedy was extraordinary. A lot of them were penned by well, they had a lot of writers, but one of the lead writers was S.J. Perlman, who was a New York City writer from like 1902 to 1940. Uh, there are anthologies of S.J. Perlman's short stories. Uh, he was essentially the Woody Allen of his day, but he had better morality. And there's no question if you ever read, and I will admit, Woody Allen was a brilliant writer when he was young. But if you read Woody's work, you see S.J. Perlman all over it. It's like he just copied S.J. Perlman's general outlook in life. But yeah, the writers back then were much more sophisticated, and the jokes had to be a little more well thought out. And I almost think that the audiences were more sophisticated because nowadays people don't get the cultural references.
I think it also had to be a cleaner as well because it was family entertainment, and there was a level of morality that had to be achieved in the comedy, or else it would have been banned. I wonder is or if you know if S.J. Perlman is any relation to Itzhak Perlman, distant
I
relative
have no
maybe.
clue.
Oh,
I don't
interesting.
know. There's a lot of. It's not exactly an unusual name in New York City.
Yeah,
Uh,
I'm gonna look out for his work though. Thank you for mentioning him.
Now I got to think of who I did. I know any Perlmans? I know a lot. I knew a few pearls. So if you knew a pearl, they probably were Pearlmen until Ellis Island, and then they were like, "Let's get rid of that part," uh,
Right,
uh,
right.
because my last name was changed on my father's last name was changed on Ellis Island. And I've been told, well, the original spelling is slightly different. And so whenever I look for foreign sources to find out about my genealogy, I have to spell it the way that it was spelled in Poland, not the way we spell it in the United States. And there's just subtle little differences. But yeah, all right, we're drifting, and drifting is a good analysis for what's happening. If you look, let me go back to see to look at the chart myself so I can use it as reference. The first chart I showed was Earth's rotational speed, and it's a pretty simple thing. But what does it mean? It means that at the equator, things are moving fast, 1,660 kilometers per hour. Uh, but you go down 10 degrees of latitude, it's okay, that's not so much. You got up to roughly where we are in New York and London, in the 40s, it's going at 1,200 kilometers an hour. So you've got this uh, 400 plus kilometer per hour difference in wind speed, and you say to yourself, wait a minute, that can't be possible. Well, it isn't. The Earth adjusts. Uh, our atmosphere takes these differences, and at a certain point, they break down. Rossby waves, which is a Norwegian meteorologist who I don't want to say he was responsible for the D-Day invasion of Normandy, but yeah, the United States Army went to the Norwegians, who at that time were the world's leading experts in climatology, and said, "Okay, when should we cross the channel to invade?" And they were going to do it on the 5th, and they said, "No, 5th is right out. Don't do it on the 5th. It's going to rain that day. Do it on the 6th." So we have to thank Rossby and his fellow Norwegians for their contributions, not just to meteorology, but to fighting the Nazis. Uh, so what happens is that because of these spectacular differences in speed from one latitude to the other, the Earth's rotational energy has to be broken up, and you get these waves, and then you get these convection currents. So if you could see me right now, I've got my hands up in the air and they're spinning circles. What direction am I going? I am going clockwise, and I think they're actually counterclockwise. So the real world is going okay. My hands are now going counterclockwise, uh, and this is how we get. Um, Columbus came to North America. Actually, he didn't come to North America. He came to the islands of the Caribbean near North America. Columbus came here on the trade winds that were roughly at 30 degrees south, and then he moved north to about 40 degrees north, where the winds are going in the opposite direction. So that's how we had the whole triangle trade in the 1500s to the 1800s, where they would go from Europe to Africa to Caribbean to the United States back to Europe. The, they these ships would go to different latitudes where the winds were blowing either east to west or west to east, and they would take advantage of these subtle differences. Uh, this was this is because the Earth has zones where the predominant winds are east to west, and then there are other zones where the predominant winds are west to east. That's because there has to be a way to adjust for the rotational speed. And so you have these convection cells caused by the Rossby waves that causes uh, uh, almost like a coordination, global coordination. And this is why storms generally globally, I think not just generally, I think almost all storms go at least, for the main part. Sometimes they switch directions briefly, but they generally go from west to east, which is funny because hurricanes go from east to west, and it's probably because they're driven by a different thing altogether. They aren't driven by guiding winds, they are driven by the temperature differentials and also the latitudes that they're in. Uh, so with all of this energy that is being imparted to the wind just by the rotation of the Earth alone. And then you have to add to it Coriolis effect, which this is essentially the Coriolis effect. And then you have to add to it temperature differentials. And around the pole, you have the vortex, uh, which has nothing to do with Doctor Who's time
Sal,
vortex. Yes.
sorry to interrupt, but I was just thinking it might help people understand, and myself included, when we're thinking about these waves, um, we have to think more in 3D, don't we? Like we have to think about them going like from north to south, but also
Well,
vertically.
you can, yes, you can flatten them out for practical purposes, and think of everything as going, as going north south, or rather going east west. But then the effectiveness is because you get the geography of the Earth. Um, the typical vortex used to be essentially uh, like Melania Trump's hat during the inaugural. It was so wide that Donald couldn't come in to kiss her.
Oh yes, I
So
saw that.
it was essentially she chose a hat specifically to make it so that nobody could invade her space.
She's smarter than
So
I gave her credit for.
so the polar vortex is the hat. that makes it very hard
The outer
for
rim or
any,
the inner rim of the hat?
the inside of the hat makes it hard for air to go south of the hat. So the Arctic used to be where you would occasionally have disruptions, but there weren't that many. So you would every a few times a year you would have disruptions in the vortex.
Okay, wait a
And
second. These Rossby waves, are they like they're from like ground surface level to how high up do they go? Or does that depend on
I,
how big
I
the wave is?
I
Because
think they can go all the way up to
like this
what
is
is it?
in the troposphere, right? Like are
This
we
is this is this is troposphere, and they can go all the way up to about 30 MB, 30 millibars. 30 millibars is uh, it's like 30 kilometers up, so they can go higher.
okay, so I'm just trying to visualize it. So I'm at ground level and I'm just it's like ocean waves, but it's in the atmosphere.
Yes.
And when
Uh,
and is the jet stream, the polar jet stream, sort of a wall that protects the polar vortex most of the time if it's functioning the way it has?
the jet stream typically was the vortex. That is the vortex. The jet stream just stayed literally in its cage,
Okay.
and occasionally it would pop out, but generally it stayed in its cage. But if you look at the last few years, you had this tremendous increase in temperature in the Arctic. And suddenly we have this rather unusual, uh, I want to say event. I don't want to say event. I want to give it anomaly, occurrence, where we have something extremely unusual. We now have a situation where, because temperatures are getting so much warmer the further north you go, the difference in temperature between the north and between the Arctic and the subarctic, the difference in temperature reduced, and because of that, the vortex is collapsing. When the difference in temperature between the north and south, or the far north and the less north, is reduced, the vortex doesn't form as strongly, and now winds can go at will. They can follow the continent's contours. And so now we get the situation where winds that used to never or rarely go below 40 degrees latitude are now going to the equator on occasion. Maybe not in the wintertime, but well, we just saw snow in Pensacola, Florida. We had snow in I don't know how far south it went, but I know there was snow in Houston. Uh,
I think Jim had snow where he is near Austin. He was sharing some pictures. Yeah, so that's in Texas. Unbelievable. So
um,
so the question is, was that because of the polar vortex, or can we
the
determine
polar
that?
it's because of the breakdown of the polar vortex, and the polar vortex, which used to prevent uh, cold air from or not so much retard cold air from coming down. It didn't prevent it. It reduced the likelihood. We now have these gigantic cold air systems that are coming down, and they will eventually, go as far south as they can, and then they're going to come right back up. And the kicker to this is you have this extreme wind pattern coming off of the Gulf of Mexico now, still Gulf of Mexico. You got this wind coming off the Gulf of Mexico. Now it's going north up the Atlantic coast, and it's continuing on to Ireland. And now you have Ireland has these 150 kilometer an hour winds. This is uh, a class 2 hurricane wind in the middle of January, actually late January in Ireland. This is the kind of thing that is mind-boggling. You would never expect to have these kind of circumstances. But this is because the polar vortex has now created it, instead of circling around the Arctic, it now has lobes, and those lobes are extending far enough south that it's picking up moisture from the Gulf of Mexico, and it's picking up higher temperatures in the Gulf of Mexico, and now it's bringing all of that wet, warm air into the Arctic for a second pass. I should, let me see if I can find this. I'm going back to my to the NCEP global forecast system, and I'm looking at the. That was me groaning. Today, or I should say, not today. Say right now. For the next, the forecast for this hour is a global anomaly of 7.24 degrees above the what is this, 1981 to 2010 baseline. So global anomaly is zero point 0.7. The Arctic anomaly is 2.7. So the Arctic is 2 degrees higher from its reference than the rest of the world is. The tropics are almost at zero anomaly. And Antarctica, again, Antarctica does whatever the hell Antarctica wants to do. It just simply says, yeah, I'm going to be a contrarian. Antarctica is 1.5 degrees above anomaly. So you've got this amazing picture where you have one gigantic swath of cold air across the face of North America, stretching all the way to Ireland. You have another swath of cold air from the Persian Gulf all the way to, I can't really see on that, but it's into Beringia. It's almost reaches all the way to Alaska. So part of what we've seen with the uh, the polar jet stream. They had this 2 years ago. It was one of the most extraordinary things I've ever seen. Was it was like if you look at a baseball, the baseballs have two pieces of leather stitched together. They're lobes on the left and the right lobe. So the two large lobes intersect with the two small regions, and they stitch it together, and you have a baseball. Uh, the world looked like that two-lobe system, but a four-lobe system. So it's almost it's like if you took a fancy watermelon and you carved the top of the watermelon into four perfect 90-degree lobes, and put that on a table. So the world had four beautiful, actually it's 45 degrees up, 45 degrees down, 45 degrees up, 45, splitting the Arctic into four, northern hemisphere, not the Arctic, northern hemisphere into four perfect lobes. This is one lobe. This is a four lobe system. It's not as perfect, but the northern hemisphere has been split into four lobes, where you have an extreme cold, extreme warm area, then you have extreme cold, then you have extreme warm, then you have extreme cold, and then the extreme warm area extends all the way from India to the Aleutian chain, and then there's the cold that's extending throughout all of North America, into southern Greenland, into the edge of the United Kingdom, and then you have the warm that is going across this Western Africa and all the way into um, not quite Scandinavia, but Scandinavia is cold and Siberia is warm. So this is the breakdown of the polar vortex into lobes, and those lobes are extremely energetic. They're bringing cold air down, and then they bring warm air up as those lobes go deeper down. I see the western part of the lobe, the one that it's all the way into the Mexican border. Uh, it's cold until the southern part of Mexico, and then you have it starts to get warm on Belize and Costa Rica. On the other side of the world, again, it's cold. It's cold. You know, Morocco Western Sahara is cold. Everything else is hot. You've got the cold lobe that starts in the Caspian Sea, and it goes into Siberia, and everything from India and Pakistan on is hot. So again, the world has literally been split into four separate, like peeling an orange, and hot, cold, hot, cold, hot, cold. This is the breakdown of the polar vortex. And what this is doing is this is bringing weather to distinct and discrete parts of the world.
I'm
Any
also
questions?
looking at a study that talks about the stability of the polar vortex and climate change. Sorry, I just had to stop for a second because my dog was going nuts. So, where is it? It's like, please
They
stop.
know.
Um,
They know.
Let me see. There's there's a study out that came in out in the journal Nature. Actually, it was last fall, that found a strong correlation between the warming Arctic, and an increase in severe winter weather, including heavy snowfall and sub-freezing temperatures. The study found that a warmer Arctic results in more frequent severe winter weather in places like central USA, Canada, and parts of Asia and Europe. The study was led by Judah Cohen, who's a climatologist at a research firm. Let me see, I think it's in DC. They looked at European gridded data collected from around the world, and they found that there was a nearly linear relationship between the temperature of the Arctic region and the frequency of harsh winter weather. He said the connection lies in the polar vortex, a swirling body of frigid air that circles the Arctic. Typically, that cold air is contained by a fast-moving current of air known as the jet stream, as Sal was telling us about. The speed of that current is typically propelled by the steep difference in temperature between the cold Arctic air and the warmer air to its south. And also, he mentions what Sal was talking about as well, that the Arctic is warming nearly 4 times faster than the rest of the world. The differences in those air temperatures are shrinking, and that can destabilize the jet stream, and it allows more frequently allows the frigid Arctic air to escape south into Canada and the central US. This study joins a growing body of research that suggests climate change could be increasing the frequency of the jet stream disruptions that allow the polar vortex to break out into lower latitudes. Similar polar vortex events have occurred in recent years, including the deadly 2021 Texas winter storm that knocked out power and resulted in hundreds of deaths. What else did he say? Another thing that they talk about with the changing weather and the weakening polar vortex is it contributes to winter weather whiplash, where we see the extreme in the temperatures. He talks about how in Boston in February 2023, they had record warm temperatures. Then the next thing you knew, they had the coldest winter weather in 60 years, and then they were back up to warm weather. So Cohen says that climate change has a lot to do with this.
I just put up another chart to the purple, which is European climate since 1940. And the real shock of this chart is if you look at since roughly 1985, temperatures in Europe have gone up a little more than 2 degrees Celsius on average. Uh, I think that's roughly the 1985. That's actually younger. The median age of Europeans is a little bit less than 40. Sorry, a little more than 40. Americans' median age is 38. So that means that most of the people in Europe who are alive right now lived in a regime where the average temperature in Europe was more than 2 degrees colder than it is now. That is mind-boggling to see that kind of a change in such a short time frame. Uh, and this is part of this, and after all, part of Europe is above the Arctic Circle. Um, a lot of this does have to deal with the northern parts of Europe, but that does translate through. A lot of people in the United States, they have no clue how far north Europe is. Uh, Spain is about as far north as New York City. We think of Spain as being tropical. We don't think of New York as being tropical. But we think of Spain as being one of the most beautiful climates on the planet. We think of it as warm and sunny, and yeah, that's it's roughly, and we don't think of Paris is roughly as far north as Montreal is. Again, we don't think of Paris and Montreal as being, equivalent. Uh, I've spoken about this before, how I had read the seminal paper from 1953 that came from Dublin on this part that I used to design called a not just a phototimer, it's an astronomic phototimer. They built these things out of vacuum tubes in the 1950s because they didn't have semiconductors back then that could do this kind of work. So they built the thing that turns the lights on and off during the night. They built these things out of vacuum tubes in 1953, Dublin. And Dublin's roughly as far north as Juneau, Alaska is. So the idea of Northern Ireland is as far north as Alaska. We don't think that is possible. But yeah, that's how things are. So it's, and I hate to say this, but we were talking about it earlier, that the Atlantic Meridional oscillating current. Yeah, that's why it's warm.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you about that. Is it the yeah? It's exactly that. Is that the short form for
AMOC.
NAO? Sorry,
Oh,
NAO. Uh, the North
overturning?
Atlantic oscillations. Is that? I was just reading about
Uh,
it in relation to what are they calling it? The teleconnections that the Rossby waves are a part of, and that it's influenced by the world's mountain ranges, by the oceans, by different pressure ridges.
I've mentioned this in the past that, yeah, geography is destiny. Is the geography of mountain ranges, the of coastlines, uh, is what gives your region its climate, terroir.
Right, and I think, like you were saying, part of the polar vortex and what's shaping it has to do with the pressure of the Aral Mountains, and what's the other one up there that is close to the polar jet stream? I'll have to look for it, but yeah, there's another one. It's interesting. I mean, it's so complicated, and that's why I've been reading about this for the last couple of days, and um, the people at NOAA are very reluctant to say that a certain weather event is because of the polar vortex, because they could say it's associated with it or connected to it, but there's so many other factors that are coming into play, like it could be a high pressure ridge over Alaska, or there's certain things that they look to say that yes, this is probably the polar vortex getting a bit wobbly or breaking down a bit is when I think it's when there's warmer weather in Europe and also in Asia. Um, but then that should be colder weather in the States, and it is quite interesting, and it's but it is also very complicated in trying to make these type of predictions.
Oliver, yeah,
Yeah.
go
I,
on. And oh my God, I'm looking at a map.
uh, yes. I was thinking about that as well. Tomorrow, actually, I'm seeing the whole clan down from Scotland. So I shall be talking about it discreetly because it's a sad occasion, but I shall be talking gently about AMOC with them because I think, with AMOC, I think there is so much. It's not muddled. It's not muddled at all. It's just it's such a sensitive subject. But I will be talking to them about what I think is the important side of it for people who live in northern Scandinavia, northern Scotland, presumably in northern Canada as well. I'm not quite sure. North eastern Canada, I think, particularly, which is best ways to adapt. I think in Canada you're pretty well adapted already because you have this, it's freezing all the time anyway. But in Scotland, not really, because the Gulf Stream itself produces this lovely warm band of water and weather all the way down the inland sea on the on the west coast. But I'm going to talk to them a little bit. I've done it a little bit before with some of the other people up there on Colonsay, particularly about adapting. Getting ready to adapt, being sensible, doing a lot more insulating of their houses and stuff like that. Doing some preparations for food, for example. There won't, ferries may be much more intermittent, and they can't. There's only so much they can gather in from the islands themselves. There is quite a lot they can do in that regard, but I'm not quite sure how much they can keep. Generating electricity, more solar, definitely more solar, and probably
Wind.
more wind as well, if they're allowed to. Oh yeah, we're allowed to do that, aren't we, in Europe? It's only in
I, I,
America.
I I just put up on the chart the European anomalies currently
Mm,
for essentially now, and it shows two amazing, actually three amazing uh, deep cold zones, and the rest of Europe is on fire. So
yeah,
you have Iceland, and Iceland is split in two. You have the UK and Ireland is cold. You have Scandinavia, the northwestern half of Scandinavia, sorry, the northeastern half of Scandinavia is quite cold, and parts of Siberia, western Siberia, sorry, eastern Siberia. I keep on switching these two. Eastern Siberia is extremely cold, and then most of Europe is really hot for this
yeah,
time of year.
yeah. Funny, isn't it? Yeah, I think it's quite, in a way, the upsets that we've all caused, humanity. It's actually quite orderly. I think the way Sal's explaining it and the way I look at it, it looks orderly almost. It looks like it's doing its thing. It knows what it's doing. It's adjusting. It's coming to terms with the fact that we screwed it up, and it's adapting, basically.
This
Yeah.
this goes back to the Japanese concept of training, where storms follow each other and
Mm,
one after another after another. They are just simply following the contours of the land. They are following the contours of the ocean underneath it, and they are hitting the same spots over and over again.
yeah. It's organised, and we're not. Basically, smart. Anyway, I'll see them tomorrow, and I'll nudge the information to them best I can. There's three generations of them tomorrow, so yeah, the whole lot. The other lot are all in their submarine tracking Russian ships. No, he's not in that one. He's in the sister ship. Lovely, lovely boats they are. Pup knows all about them. Yeah.
I'm trying to remember. I had a second topic in mind about this. Uh, Yeah, that's what happens when you get burned out. Um, I've been doing so much work on other things I've been looking at other
Yeah, yeah.
data sets, and I'm kind of forgetting my original train of thought. But we are going to start to see February 2025, and February 2024 was extraordinarily warm. So I can't imagine. I mean, it's possible. It's always possible that we will uh, have similar temperature sets to this, but I don't see it. I really don't see how it could possibly be warmer. But at the same time, we're getting something else that's, I'm not going to say unusual. Um, we had a roughly 3 year period where we either had a weak La Nina or a neutral. Then we had this 18-month pretty strong El Nino. And now we're back at La Nina, but it doesn't look like we're going to be here for long. The current calculation is that uh, we do these in 3 month uh, to blend the data to smooth it out. So this is the MAM, the March, April, May. And the current anticipation is that March, April, and May is going to step out of La Nina back into neutral. And most likely this summer, we will be back into a mild, either a neutral phase, warmer neutral phase, or maybe even back to El Nino. So we, everybody in the climate community was thinking, oh, 2025 is definitely going to be, colder than 2024. It's probably going to be colder than 2023. Now it looks like, maybe this is going to be warmer than 2023. It's still too early, but we're seeing changes that we would never have anticipated. Part of this, something I saw Kim had mentioned earlier, global fires have been putting out so much CO2 into the atmosphere that we're going to shatter the record this year by probably at least 2.5 parts per million. So I don't know, obviously, none of us can tell when, but it looks like we're going to break the 2024 record in late February or early March, and this will continue to go up 3 months past that. So the sky is the limit, and a lot of this is because it's twofold. One is the fires that have emitted so much CO2, but the other part is the secondary. When you burn uh, old growth trees that are at their prime, that there are young trees grow much, much larger, but they cannot grow as fast as older trees. So if you take a 30-year-old tree, that 30-year-old tree can absorb a lot more CO2 than a 15-year-old tree or a 50-year-old tree. So when you burn those middle-aged trees, those teenagers, you reduce the ability for the forests to absorb CO2. And right now, it looks like the Arctic has been so degraded by fire in the last few years that the Arctic is currently a net producer of CO2. More fires are being generated in the Arctic than trees absorbing the CO2 to create new plant material. This is an extraordinary circumstance. Let's hope this doesn't continue along the way. It has to stop. I'm going to just mention something I said way at the beginning when only like two or three of us were here. You hear a lot of times the deniers, or I should say this, the climate deniers, the skeptics say, we need more CO2. Why do we need more CO2? Because the more CO2 there is, the more the plants can give us oxygen. And gasoline is roughly 30% heptane and pentane. And that's actually, there's also a lot of the larger volatiles. But if you look at heptane and pentane, C5 and C6, hydrocarbon chains, it will give you 11 CO2 molecules for every 17.5 O2 molecules. So by creating CO2 so that the plants can turn it back to oxygen, you are taking more oxygen than the plants can give back in oxygen. It is not a zero-sum game. So when we burn hydrocarbons, we are not giving the plants more fertilizer for them to create more oxygen. We are taking more oxygen out of the environment. So the whole claim that these guys make is, oh, but humans need to breathe. Yeah, so why are you burning fossil carbon, which is reducing the global O2 amount? If maybe these people, because they are themselves affiliated with the plant kingdom, maybe that's why they want more CO2. And I see we have a request. Pup. I wish you could just do an automatic. Oh, yeah, this person's allowed to speak whenever they want.
You can't
I
always
just,
do automatic.
before Pup says anything, sorry, Oliver, I just want to, something I was thinking about the other day about these fires in LA, that I know we've been talking about, how the drought season sort of operated concurrently with the Santa Ana winds, um, and that it followed like a wetter than usual 2023, which allowed like the brush to grow. But I don't think we're talking about it enough that the you know that we're in winter and we have a fire season going. So yeah, I mean it is wintertime in the northern hemisphere and California is burning.
It just didn't rain for months and months. It didn't rain, and then
But
the
this should be.
Santana.
Don't you think the alarm bells should be ringing right now? That it's just.
They. I
And
think most people, let's say people, politicians, they're just lazy. They won't learn, basically. It's not that hard to learn. It may take a little time if evening class and so on, but they just don't want to. They're too busy, snouts in the trough, keeping going, making, groceries and all that. They just don't want to know. I mean, they don't even understand when Trump waves his horrible signature at them saying, we've pulled out of the Paris Agreement again. They don't even understand what it's about. They don't know. They're just thinking groceries and price of petrol and all the rest of it. It's just tragic.
Yeah, I mean, this is what we've got to keep on saying, though. We've got to
Yes.
keep on saying it loud and clear that this is not normal. This is climate change. This is part of the climate crisis. This is a climate emergency. I mean,
Absolutely.
communities are being destroyed. They're no longer there. They're turning to ash, and it's a toxic ash. And it's continuing on. Like we saw yesterday, there was more winds, and I think
another
about
new fire. There's a new fire,
right,
isn't there?
another new fire.
Big
I
one.
think they have it a bit better under control, but California's on fire. It's burning. It is heavily influenced by climate change.
It does
Yes.
look like they are going to get rain next week. So that
Hurrah.
should make a spectacular difference.
Which
This is the rainy season.
yes, that's right. It is the rainy season, and you know what? We should also talk about what Trump did. What did he get rid of? And
Common sense and wisdom.
Where do you start?
well, I
I
don't
mean,
think he had any of that.
No. I like the bishop, though. I did like the bishop giving you a talking to. Oh, I love that. I know it's a digression.
That was amazing.
I did like it, and there was a photo of Trump and Mel T, so I have to call her Mel T now because I can't really. The vicious looks on their face, directed at her quite clearly. So one of the journalists got a wonderful shot of it. Yeah.
But aren't they claiming to be good Christians now?
Yes, exactly.
Well, I don't think he put his hand on the Bible.
No.
No, he didn't.
No, he definitely didn't. Well spotted.
Everybody made the same joke, including me.
He didn't put his hand over his heart at Jimmy Carter's funeral. All the other presidents did.
He's a
He did
louse,
not.
isn't he? He's such a louse. Oh, it's just awful. Oh dear.
So many of us made the same joke that he was afraid if he were to put his hand on a Bible, it would catch fire.
Hey, Sal.
Hello,
Yep.
pup.
Yeah, what you were talking about with heptane, it's actually worse than that because a lot of our motor fuels are stereoisomers versus native singular isomers. So, when they
Oh, I
blend,
just used the top two. It's like, yeah, there's like 500 different molecules in gasoline.
yeah, in diesel fuel, in gasoline, there's 27 different isomers and stereoisomers that make up our gasoline motor fuels. And when you get into diesel, it gets even more complicated yet. And especially if you're talking about the blending of fuels and the blending of those tanes for winter and summer. Um, but yeah, when you're talking about the amount of CO2 per a given isomer, you really have to say it's twice that. At least a portion of it is twice that bad because it's a stereoisomer. You've got two effective hydrocarbon chains that are bonded, and so now instead of being, for instance, in your example, 11 products of CO2, you're really talking about 22. Anyway, and by the
Yeah,
way,
and
go
yeah,
ahead.
no, yes, it's 22, but it's also now you're taking 35 molecules of O2, not 35 hydrogen atoms.
Correct. Correct. And regarding Trump
So,
putting his hand on the Bible, the Onion actually did photoshopped him signing the Bible and giving it back to the priest. So it was like he didn't know what to do with it, so he just signed the fucker and handed it back. Anyway, um, but
did he then demand money for the signature?
yeah,
Did
yeah,
he throw the pen out into the audience and say, "Here you go, here you go, here you go"?
like
I
ketchup
think he only
packets
does that
or
with paper towels.
rolls of paper towels. Yeah, that would be Trump.
No, he was
Um,
doing that at the inauguration. He was signing things on the stage and then throwing the pens out, like it's a baseball game or something like that. I don't know, or
like
a
he's a
tennis
fucking
player throwing. Yeah,
like he's a
right.
rock star throwing his guitar picks into the audience or drumsticks. What a moron! What a
Or
fucking
a tennis player throwing the towels. Yeah, I know. Well, speaking of, actually, guys, speaking of chemicals, another thing I wanted to touch on today was about the toxicity of these LA fires because of the amount of
Uh,
plastics and synthetic materials that are burning in their homes and that are in our homes. The quote is, "The modern sofa is basically a block of gasoline." They wouldn't. The one of the LA fire chiefs, David Acuna, is quoted as saying, due to the toxicity of the materials inside the homes, it's one of the reasons we can't put firefighters in front of the houses.
yeah. Well, if you get fiberglass
oh,
insulation hot enough, the fumes and the toxicity, or if you're talking about polystyrene rigid board insulation, that is some nasty shit. Or the gases released are some really nasty shit when it burns.
Right. I was reading that some of the foam, like the polyurethane foam that are probably in most of our couches, when it burns, it releases potentially deadly hydrogen cyanide gas.
Yeah,
How? How do we allow this into our house?
well, the same thing is true in a lot of rigid board polystyrene and spray foam insulation. Those are cyanide based compounds. So, yeah, you're going to get some hydrogen cyanide when you burn it.
Like like firefighters don't want to go anywhere near these fires because they're too toxic. I mean, they're basically just doing life-saving operations and then getting the heck out of there.
It's what
this is
I'd
So,
be
something we
doing.
discovered. This is something we discovered during 9/11, and it's a major. I believe at this point in time, we now have more people who have died of cancer on the firefighters than who died on 9/11 in the towers falling or the Pentagon being struck.
Yeah, absolutely. Very, very sadly. That's absolutely right. Yeah.
So the first responder casualties, and not just first responders, people who are living in the area, people who are working in the area, uh, people who went to school in the area.
Well,
I know someone who went to school in Stuyvesant.
right.
Uh,
I mean, I can still see those images in my mind of 9/11 and just the debris falling out of the sky, and you knew it was something toxic coming down from those buildings. Um, I mean, there's a lot of studies coming out about this right now about, basically the indirect deaths due to these wildfires or these, I think probably much worse are the urban wildfire interfaces where it's the fires are burning synthetic man-made materials, which are not good for you. They say in a 2016 study, the death toll from the wildfire produced air pollution, so this is from the air pollution itself, from the 2015 Indonesian fire was over 100,000 people. In LA, for 2 days, the EPA issued a hazardous warning due to the high levels of PM 2.5. But these type of warnings, they don't take into account the toxic composition of the smoke from the urban nature of these fires. In the 2018 Camp Fire, it destroyed 18,000 structures in Paradise, California. What they found were increased levels of lead and zinc. And now lead, I mean, it's linked to a host of health problems, some of them being like high blood pressure. It could affect women and men's reproductive organs and their ability to reproduce. It's a precursor for cancer, and people develop also breathing problems as well. And then, well, another study looked at what is the mortality after natural disasters. They were looking at hurricanes, but you could easily apply them to these fires that are happening today. And what happens over time is that there are increases in the death rates, and the the in the study that looked at the hurricanes, they looked at it, I think, between 1930 and 2015, and they found that the post storm was responsible for 3 to 5% of the deaths across the USA. That's huge.
what I was going to mention, uh, for a lot of these um, volatile organic chemicals that are being released, what they are is, believe it or not, flame retardants. So the
I
flame
believe that.
retard, so the flame retardants are what's causing the greatest issues.
It's the Scotch Guard, right? I remember years ago when my kids were young, I got a new sofa and they put Scotch Guard on it and they delivered it to my house, and it was like they had put slime on it and it smelled horrible. And the next day I called them. I said, take that thing away and bring me back one that doesn't have it. And I've never had it since that day. And I think that's, very toxic for people.
Those are just sofas. I live in by Grenfell. I mention it sometimes. The panels that they used were, yes, they had a retard in them, definitely, but the retard itself burned really, really well under certain circumstances. A little bit like the urban areas in LA, in so much as once it had got started and it was fanned, then the thing just took off like a wildfire, right up the building, right around it. You probably remember the pictures of it. And it's the same thing happened in LA, where basically, although the housing is smaller by and large, it's like perfect kindling right the way across the whole. I call it a fire plane, actually, like a floodplain, but a fire plane. And yes, they'll learn big lessons about not covering fire planes with housing completely because it's just a popular place to live, understandably, but also giving breaks in it, giving breaks in those developments and those layouts, those towns, basically. So hopefully, there will be lessons that will be severely learned about that.
Definitely, we do need those fire breaks. I think we also have to think about the way that we're building structures nowadays. They did do a study in some fire labs in North Carolina where they had two different rooms. One was a room full of natural materials, so like wood furniture, cotton, wool, lace, like grandma's house, basically
Yeah.
of yesteryear, and then our IKEA synthetic plastic living room. And the to no one's surprise here, I'm sure, the sort of the old fashioned or old school natural based room, I think basically, I think they call it flea time. The flea
Yes.
time for that room was a half an hour, where the synthetic room was 5 minutes. So that's the other thing about these fires, is that
Oh, yes.
not only do we have the drought conditions, but we've got the things inside of them that are just combustibles,
Mm.
right? They don't resist fire in any way. They probably aid the fire.
We live in a hydrocarbon based world. So
Absolutely.
if you're making all of your fabrics out of crude oil, expect it to burn the way crude oil would. John John has his hand up. So at your leisure, John John, and good morning, and
Yes. Good morning. Good
not
morning.
good morning, good afternoon.
Oh, yes. Just after morning, I guess. We're talking about the gases and the chemicals and the VOCs and LA fires, and I was in a space the other day, although they forgot to record it. But people were talking about the different ways right now if you want to not breathe it in. So one of the big things is building air filters for indoors if if you have a place to stay, you know. So there's these Corsi Rosenthal boxes with fans and MERV 13s, and then we're talking about activated carbon. So there's some filters that come with activated carbon, but the activated carbon can re-release. Uh, and this is a point where I might not be this is where I'm bringing it up, because maybe you know a bit
Backflow.
more. There's potassium permanganate they were talking about needing to add that, or somehow maybe coat the activated carbon or just add it in as a way to have it react so that it doesn't re-release it. Is this something that you're familiar with?
I haven't used that in I don't know 40 years. Uh,
Hmm.
it's a lab material I used to use. I don't know.
Okay, okay. But figured I would bring that up. And then the other thing is, if people are down there and there's different types of respirators, and you know me, I love respirators, and these are the ones that I like to use. So they are the P100s with multi-gas. They have activated carbon also on the inner chambers, and so that would be something that I think is like definitely appropriate given what you guys are talking about, everything that's been burnt up. So yeah, I don't know
Sorry,
if it applies to
We,
anyone.
John,
we can't get people to wear KN95s.
The thing is that I mean the
I
thing is
know.
that there's a psychological reasoning as well, right? To that. Because the original ones with the KN95s, N95s, or filter masks, it's intended for source control through, with pandemic times, it was to protect others, which psychologically is much less immediate or important to most people, I think, just being realistic about it. Although there's definitely people that will just, protect others before they protect themselves. But I think that in this case, it is a direct threat to the individual. The psychology reverses completely around. And so you know, the idea that there are no respirators to protect the person that's wearing it was not really true. It was just sort of something that needed to be said in order to get everybody on board, right? But the fact is, there are respirators that protect the person, and those are the ones we would want everyone to get because we want to protect them from breathing it in, right? It's not a source control issue with the smoke. It's not like you breathe in the smoke, then you can cough the smoke into someone else. You want to not breathe in the smoke, right? So I think in this case, P100s with the multi-gas, it's just they're there, and many people who are, wouldn't want to wear the smaller masks, they have experience in like workers' health and safety environments or toxic environments. They're gonna know what to do, right? So I think that the respirators are the right the right way to go, given that it's chemical contaminants in the air. So that's my
Uh,
piece.
can I ask
I
you a
hate to say
question,
this.
John?
Oh,
John? Sorry. Are these? I don't know enough about the P100s. Are these like basically gas masks? Because that's what I understand that you would need to protect yourself in
Well,
LA against these toxins.
well, it gets into like semantics and slang and what we call things and whatnot. I would say a gas mask is like a military issue thing or like a police force thing, and they have their own whatever those are, and I don't know about them. But an elastomeric respirator is modular. Like you can attach particle filters to it, you can attach gas filters to it that have particle filters. So you basically have this thing that which is citizens and workers have these, whether you're hobbyist doing painting or if you're, I don't know, you're doing plastic recycling industrially and there's fumes. So you're going to have this face piece that is going to have a large or medium or small. Unfortunately, they don't like make more sizes, but they probably should. But they you have to get that piece, and then they have inserts that like cartridges of different types depending on the activity that you want to do. So they have different ones for woodwork, they have different ones for asbestos or whatever. So I would not call them gas masks. I would call them like air masks, and they can filter based on what you need to filter in the air. So, and given that gas masks, there's a certain like sensationalizing to what those are for, and our lack of acceptance for non-sensational uses of them. Like, I would avoid that term personally, but uh, I know a little bit of the history of like the invention. It's this amazing Black American inventor named Garrett Morgan, and he was credited as making the first, I guess it was a fume hood, but it's like the first gas mask. And his inventions, his legacy is safety. So he patented the 3 light traffic light that we see around the world with the
mhm.
yellow light. And he made this fume hood, and I guess it was about like the tubes would drop low to the ground so that, as the smoke rises, the oxygen is more likely to be there and less smoke. That was kind of the concept of his invention. He wore this thing, and he experienced all this discrimination against him because people didn't like, maybe, that he was a black inventor in a time period where there was lots of like discrimination and stuff. So he couldn't get his invention in with the firefighters very easily. He had to use models and sort of hide himself away from him being the inventor in order for it to be accepted, right? And so I'm just, giving this little piece of history, and apparently he used his invention to save someone in a fire. Like, to me, when I read up about this guy, he's like the coolest legend ever, because I love masks. So I just want to point to you that the original invention was for like firefighting or for safety. Yeah, that's my piece.
That's very interesting to know. So I just wanted to circle back because so are you saying that these P100 masks with certain filters that you can modulate onto it are like 100% safe for all the toxins that people are
I'm not
breathing
saying
in
100%.
okay, well,
Like, I
90,
mean,
95?
well, the thing is that me calling it a P100 is like a slang, because the P100 rating is for the cartridge that screws into it. It's a respirator, or respirator mask.
Do
I
you
don't
have
know.
a
I
link
don't know
for
the
it,
term.
John? Do you have any links for
Yeah,
it? If you
sure,
could,
sure, sure,
okay, if
sure.
you could put those in the
But
purple
just to
pill, that would be
clarify,
great.
like, um, respirator comes from the Latin word respirare. So science, it's always about there's a Latin name.
Mhm.
So respirare means to rebreathe. So that implies that it's designed for breathing, right? So that it implies in the name itself that it's meant for breathing, and there's like design aspects around comfort and fit, and it's just like a beautiful, there's a whole history of like better and better, and they're getting better. They keep getting better with them, actually. So
Uh-oh, he cut out.
Yeah,
It's
I think okay. Well,
it's worth getting a good housing. That's I call them cups. The attachments. I use two attachments. I use a chemical attachment, and then on top of that, I use a dust attachment, and that just about covers the one thing I have to keep out of my system is silica. And there's like sandstone, for example, is just like silica, period. So these masks are absolutely crucial. But I really recommend, if you ever get one, that you get a soft one that has a nice, soft, well formed and well molded casing, because that way you'll get a nice, good seal around your face. Mine are a bit cheap, I have to say, because I'm a bit of a skinflint when it comes to work equipment. But they still, do a pretty neat job, pretty good. They
so
really
you
are
would probably need
designed
a
to.
papper.
Yeah,
You'd
I think
probably need
so.
a
Yes.
papper. Eh? Sorry, I just got a
I mean,
call, and that's why I dropped off. Sorry about that.
mhm.
or Kim, you could go the whole hog and get a system that feeds you air. A lot
A
of the
bubble.
Stonies, a bubble, literally. Not like not a cube bubble like in Contagion, but an actual mask bubble. But a lot of the Stonies use them in the workshops for that very reason, because of course they're much more prone to getting respiratory diseases, because that's what they're doing all day indoors. Even though they've very often got hoods that actually get a lot of the dust, they still are very prone to it. A lot of them are idiots, and they'll be using grinders with no protection whatsoever, and
Oh
they.
God.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, they do exactly. That's exactly how.
Well, there is an allergy an analogy to silicosis, and that's with cotton fibers. The people who worked in the fashion
Oh,
industry, the
right.
people who worked
Yes.
with
Yes.
cotton, had essentially the same illness. Is the fabric, the
With
fibers would
yes,
get
that's
into
right.
their
They do
lungs and
absolutely
cause
yes.
exactly the same problem.
In the mills in north of England, here they loads of them had it. That's right.
And you
Absolutely.
hear it's like the average life expectancy of these guys was the 40s.
Yep.
Every
Yeah.
one of them pretty much had cancer.
And the kids went earlier because the fluffers, well, they were, I know it's the wrong word perhaps, but they were sort of locally called fluffers. They were going in between all the machinery, cleaning all the fluff off. They were kids aged anywhere between 6 and 10, usually younger because they're small, you see, so you nip around underneath. And they often died very, very young as well. We're criminal, aren't we? We're cruel too. We don't learn. We don't learn either. That's the trouble.
Uh,
Not to be
We
cruel
won't
to
talk
each
about
other.
chimney swifts.
No, God, no.
They also had like a 12-year-old life expectancy. Very, very rare for a chimney swift to be able to make it into its teens. Yes, we
Awful.
are extraordinarily cruel. Just by the way, I know this has nothing to do. It actually has nothing to do with it, so I'm going to take that back immediately. Always look for the best quality paper to put into your printer because cheap paper has a lot of
Yeah.
floss in it or fluff, and it will ruin your printer. All right, so don't save $5 on paper and then destroy a $100 or $200 printer in no time flat. This has
Oh,
been a public service announcement.
oh, thank you for that because I actually do. I think I buy the second cheapest type of paper. So, and I
Oh
do have
no.
problems with my printer. And well, I think I bought my printer for $100, but the cartridges for it cost $80.
Oh.
Yeah, what happens is that the floss is coming off of the paper and is going into the gearing on the platine and the drum, and it literally chews the drums up,
Yeah.
and it damages the platines, and it damages all the little gears inside of it.
So
So
that's
cheap
why.
paper,
Yeah, that's why you
yeah,
always
it's
see.
like
That's what you see, that's why I'm always seeing. What do you call it? Printers dumped on the side of the road or wherever, outside houses and so on. It's always printers. What That's it, isn't it?
yeah, because
Right.
they're too cheap to recycle to repair.
Yes.
And
You
I,
know, there
They
is a
get you
third
on
way.
the cartridges,
Mhm.
right?
But there is a
yes.
third way. There is another way. Don't have a printer. Mm.
Well, you know what? For a lot of people, if I mean, for a lot of the work that people do, they can just go to I don't know what's your equivalent to
Like a
a
photocopy place,
local, yeah, but
like a Staples or a Business
Yes,
Depot or.
Staples. It would be
sta-
Staples. Yep.
Oh, you
Staples
have Staples? Okay.
and
Mm. Mm.
so yeah, that is the the place where if you do have to print a 100-page sheet every few months, then you can do it there and not buy a printer, and it'll end up costing you less in the long run. Although my printer right now is serving as a completely different application. It's got the remains of mackerel on it because that was where she liked to sit.
Oh.
So my wife put her on the printer, and I'm staring at her on the printer right now.
Oh.
Uh,
No. How
I
sad.
think it's act- I think it's actually a nice, fitting tribute to her.
Yeah. Yeah, we do something like that as well. Oh dear. Oh. The old dog's ball and his little owl and so on. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, we have discussed probably taking her one of these days to the Hudson River and releasing her to the Hudson. But maybe not when it's covered by ice. I think we're gonna. It's not. It's actually not that bad right now. You weren't here earlier. The Hudson River. I was wondering if we would get cold enough this year because we really haven't had a frozen over Hudson since like 94, 95. But it's not going to get cold enough for that to happen.
No.
And it used to be in the 60s and 70s, it would, almost every year, it would at least freeze south of what was back then the Tappan Zee Bridge, now the Mario Cuomo Bridge. But now, most of the time, it doesn't freeze. You have to go all the way, way up north before you get to see freezing temperatures. Um, yes, it is global warming, or rather regional warming, that the northern as I broke the world down earlier into North Pole to the Arctic goes to the Arctic Circle. Then you have the subarctic, which is from the Arctic Circle to the Tropic of Cancer. That section from 23 degrees north to 64, 66 degrees north has only slightly warmed up less than the Arctic. So that's why, as I was showing, how Europe has had essentially 2 degrees C temperature increase in the last 40 years. That is shocking and frightening. And what are the long-term consequences of this? Well, obviously, we're going to lose all of our glaciers. I think we've pretty much lost, for argument's sake, most of the European glaciers, which means that you're going to lose a lot of okay, glaciers do a lot more than just look pretty in photographs. Glaciers act as temporary storage for rainwater and snowpack. So you have the snowpack during this time of year. Whatever falls on the ice stays ice. And then as you start to get spring thaw and you get spring melt going through the remainder of the summer season, the mountain flows into the glacial water flows into streams and becomes like a reservoir. So ice is not just ice. Ice is a temporary storage of water. The problem is, as we are losing, especially the Himalayan ice, uh, that is what feeds the Ganges. That is what feeds the Yellow River. There's something like 3 billion people globally who depend upon the Himalayan ice for their water supply. And if those glaciers melt in the next 50 years, 100 years, where are they going to draw water for agriculture? So this is another aspect of the threat of global warming. It's not just warming, it's also a complete and total change to hydrology. It is going to do a massive change to the ability for people to feed themselves, especially because a lot of the crops that we're talking about in Asia, rice, for instance, is extremely um, hydrophilic. It requires a spectacular amount of water.
And the dams as well, of course. Those dams. The Chinese love to build dams, and they built the biggest in the world anywhere, and they're all going to be affected likewise. And what are they going to do? Are they going to generate energy, or are they going to feed their people? They've got a choice, basically. They think they can do both, maybe. No, I mean, I don't see it happening. They're going to fill their reservoirs first, so they've got the energy. It actually is a perfect Chinese puzzle for them. They'll work
Yeah,
it out. They're smart, they'll work something out. I know they will.
a lot of people say that the Chinese are developing are creating so much using so much coal because it's cheap, is because the coal is available. But the fact is, the Chinese also they generate more annual wind and solar capacity than the rest of the world combined.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is their cities are impossible to live in during the summer.
Mm-hmm.
And India has something similar to that, but worse. In India, it's not just the industrial; it's also slash and burn. The way they do they prepare the land for the next crop
That's
is
stupid,
they
isn't
don't
it?
weed, they just burn. Well, they
Ah,
say that the advantage of slash and burn is that you're quickly
turn
returning
around, yeah.
the material back into the
Mm.
soil, but you're also returning that material into people's lungs. So when you have 800 parts per million of PM 2.5 in Delhi, sorry, New Delhi, you are at risk of killing hundreds of thousands of people in your city a year due to PM 2.5 pollution. And it's not just killing; it's also the leading cause of childhood asthma.
Yeah.
So it's you.
Completely unnecessary, Sal. Too. It's absolutely you can use all that for regenerative agriculture, for cover crops and so on, or you can use it for David, the sci-fi guy's thing of actually dropping it in the ocean if it works. Then there's that as well. So there's all sorts of you can use it for building materials to a degree as
Yes.
well. There's so much you can use it for other than just burn it. I
I
just
hate to
think,
say it, but it's not like they have labor shortages
yeah,
there.
exactly.
They can hire people to do this.
Well,
People will pay them to take it away.
I feel like the Chinese are studying these things, are conducting scientific research, are sending their people all around the world to attend the best universities and come back, and then they go back to China and they develop a plan because their country is losing land to the process of desertification, and they're fighting that with the green wall. They're fighting their high levels of air pollution and dust storms with solar energy. They see what's happening. They're going to be like, Asia is one of the sort of, alarm areas for climate change. And I think the Chinese are onto this, and they realize if we want to be a dominant force in the future, we've got to deal with this today.
There is such a dynamic going on there in China and Japan also that has to deal with median age, that has to do with the fact that both of those countries are actually in population decline. So if you have countries that are losing people and also having increased median age, you start to have a top-down economy where you have more and more people who are pensioners who are being supported by fewer and fewer workers. And that is why there is so much automation in Japan and China. That's why they're doing everything possible to make their economies as efficient as possible, because they understand that they're reaching a point where neither one of those countries are very, very good at importing workers. They're both extremely xenophobic. They don't like to have outsiders living in their nations. So they're up against the wall. They're trying to technologically get their way out of this demographic trap.
Right, but they're definitely, I mean, China especially, I mean, it's a world leader in renewable energy. So,
By far.
yeah, by far, like, kudos to them, right? I mean,
Chinese have always been
This
very
is
smart, very
right.
adaptable, and they've done a lot. In the camps in World War II, that they were really badly treated, actually by the Japanese, but they really very clever, very smart, tolerant as well, and humorous with it. I mean, that's just the way they are. We have a picture, but that's not the picture really that is true. I think they're very, very, very cool-headed people. I hope we can all work it out.
the
Yeah.
funny the funny part about China is if you want to really get down and dirty, is they were always the world's leading capitalists. And then you had the Chinese Revolution. So you have the
Right.
world's leading capitalists who are forced to become communists,
So
and
now
and they're
they've circled back to it, is what you're saying.
finally, yes.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think, America might be headed in the opposite direction. With, how is it capitalism and free market if
If if
the
if Trump decides which companies are going to be favored.
right, if he decides no more approval of new wind leases, and lifting restrictions on resource extraction, cutting off money dedicated to electric vehicle charging stations. I think in Ohio alone, in the EV car factories, and also for battery storage and these charging stations that they talk about, there's 100,000 people employed. He's just, and Ohio went red. He's basically turned his back on Ohio.
Uh, let's just say that you would globally this is a problem of that people vote against their best interests, and then they're shocked to find out that things aren't going to change. I
Well,
know this is
I know
this is
you. This
very
is
very quickly. This is anecdotal, and it's only one data point. Actually, it's two data points. But the United States gasoline prices have started going up, and egg prices, which everybody was talking about egg prices are going through the roof right now. But wasn't Trump supposed to fix this? Well, maybe people are going to finally get the message that it's a lot more complicated than they think it is. Uh, um, but that requires education and thinking, and I don't know how many people are capable of that right now.
Well, I mean, I guess, reading into these Trump mandates or executive orders or whatever they're called, it makes me feel a bit better, because actually it's not written in stone that any of these things are going to happen. Because I think for the U.S. to be officially out of the Paris Climate Accord, it takes about a year for the whole process to occur. And he has to formally submit something to the United Nations. On the
It
other hand,
can take longer, a lot longer. They were still trying to exit the Paris from the first time it was done.
right.
So yeah, you're right. It can take a while.
But can we get honest here and very, very blunt? There is no mechanism for enforcing Paris Accords. So it almost doesn't matter anyway if we follow them or not, because there's no way to be punished for not doing what you say you're going to do.
Basically, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I guess you just hold your head in shame or something like that. But
Yeah, so this is all just nonsensical to begin with. The
did
Paris
any
Accords were designed to be non-effective,
Jelly.
and congratulations, it worked.
Jelly, basically.
well, did anybody see that? I think it was today or yesterday that Bloomberg, um, that philanthropy organization from New York, has said they will front the money that America owes to their climate finance
Ooh,
commitments.
crikey.
Yeah, isn't that this
That's
is and
massive.
this goes to, I don't know if anybody read what Al Gore said after Trump was inaugurated, but
Not yet.
part of it is that he says, I'll just read this verbatim, that in quotes, that's why in the coming weeks, months, and years, climate leaders and activists must not be deterred or distracted. From extreme weather disasters like Hurricane Helene and the still burning Los Angeles wildfires, to the growing number of climate refugees, to competitiveness in the global economy, the climate crisis will have profound consequences for the United States over the next 4 years. If the new administration won't lead on this issue, it is up to all of us. Now is the time for governors, mayors, business leaders, investors, and activists, that's us, to put their heads down and do the work that will advance the climate solutions our nation and the world so urgently need. We were able to keep up the pace of climate action during the first Trump administration, and it is urgent that we take up the mantle once again. And end of quote. And I think, the fact that Bloomberg set out that we're going to make sure that the climate change, the climate crisis is financed, is, we're saying, Trump, you know what, it would be great to have you here with us, but we're going to continue on. And Al Gore also talks about how this is going to harm America. China is going to continue on its road, and American workers and the American economy will be left behind because it is investing in the infrastructure for energy of the 20th century. Renewable energy is the 21st century.
We've got an interesting situation here in the United States, and partly it's also happening in Europe, but not to the same degree. But Chinese automakers, they still aren't building the level of quality that we want, and especially when it comes to vehicle strength and survivability and impacts. But Chinese cars are lapping the rest of the world right now, and everybody talks about how wonderful Teslas are, and BYD and NIO are eating their lunch. They are going above and beyond. So where everybody is having these extraordinary tariffs to prevent Chinese cars from coming into their countries, I don't think they need to have tariffs. I just think they need to have very well defined barriers based on safety. So instead of charging an arm and a leg of 100% tax on Chinese cars, just make sure that Chinese cars will meet a safety standard. That if they crash into a offset crashing barrier at 40 miles an hour, that everybody has to survive in the car. But then again, the United States is against any and all of safety regulations to begin with. But this is the way you should do the economics of technology. If a company builds, or a country, but if a company builds a better product, you let that product in. You don't ignore that product's ability to outperform. This is what killed the American car companies in the 1970s. Is American consumers really didn't buy Japanese or European efficient vehicles. So over time, because of the lack of competition in the American automobile industry, our products became worse and worse quality. So then when they finally said, well, we have no choice because our cars are getting 4 miles per gallon and the price of fuel is the equivalent of $15 a gallon today, now they had to do something about people were buying cheaper Japanese and more efficient European cars, and they saw for themselves that those cars were superior to the American cars of that day. They're going to get the same problem now with Chinese cars. Eventually, these Chinese cars are going to make their way into the United States, and people are going to see how they are so much better than than the native built cars. It is, and I'm gonna is
Oh,
Pup with us? I'm looking
also, Sal, do you
because I'm
think,
I'm gonna.
Sal, I'm just wondering, like, it seems like by not allowing cars that could potentially be a lot cheaper, EVs into the economy, they're delaying, the green economy, the
Oh, of course,
renewable
but
economy, because the average person can't afford most of the vehicles of the North American, and also maybe even like Toyota Prius. Most people can't afford those cars, right? Or, I mean,
well,
definitely not
actually, the
Teslas.
Prius is affordable. The Prius is pretty
Oh,
affordable.
is it? Okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna do a tiny rant here. 10 years ago, when Elon Musk was still a man, and before he had sacrificed his reputation to become a trillionaire, he was talking about making small, efficient EVs for the common man. And the first thing he did was he did the Model S, which was essentially a Mercedes S class. Look at S is the international designation for the top of the line cars. So the first thing he did was to make super expensive cars, and then he released the X, which was uh, the SUV version of the X. Again, cars that were six figures that the average person couldn't afford. They then decided to go for the Y and the 3, which were much cheaper cars. Yes, but they also continued to do the Plaid, which were instead of a 1,000 mile a 1,000 mile vehicle that range, they went for a vehicle with 1,000 horsepower. So instead of going for uh, efficient, low fuel, even if it's electrical, electricity, low energy cost vehicles, he went for expensive, high speed vehicles. So throughout his entire career, he has given the facade, the claim that I am doing this for the benefit of the human race, when he did the opposite across the board. Right now, he is pretty much demanding all of his workers who used to be remoting a few days a week, now they have to come into the office. And he's trying to push that for the entire United States, that everybody has to come into the office. But isn't this the same guy who also wants us to be able to go to Mars so that we can work from telecommute from Mars to Earth? There is a complete dichotomy here. He has divorced himself from everything he claimed in the past. So was he just bullshitting us from the start? I think yeah. I think it's clear that from the beginning he he had these high expectations, but he never really meant to go through with it. He just wanted to become a trillionaire.
Well,
And it's clear. Go on.
I mean, after the last few days of what's occurred, there's no respect for that person. Absolutely none.
I,
Also, if you look at the stage of the inauguration, the billionaires that were lining that
Yeah,
stage, come
yeah.
on.
The
What has
seven
happened?
heads, the seven heads of the beast, literally.
Like, what type of control are these
Mm,
tech gods gonna have over the American and the world, the global
uh,
economy?
I don't know if it is enough for us to do an entire space on, although we can definitely do a piece of a space on it. But AI sucks. I don't care
Here,
what
here.
anybody says.
I
AI sucks.
agree. I totally agree.
Right? I wanted to get an exact quotation of Coleridge's rhyme of the Ancient Mariner because I know that the line is water, water everywhere, nor any drop to drink. I wasn't sure if it was drops to drink or drop to drink.
Drop, I'm sure, but it doesn't matter because it's
And not a drop to
It
drink.
just it doesn't matter because it's no, that's it's not no, that's the problem. It's nor any drop to
nor any
drink.
drop to drink.
Not
Yeah,
not a drop to drink.
that's
And
different.
everybody thinks it's not a drop to drink. And AI says it's not a drop to drink. But
Ah, ah,
those of us who actually read poetry when we were young,
yeah,
it's
yeah,
nor any drop to drink. So
yeah.
you go on AI and you ask for Coleridge's
Get it
Rhyme of the
wrong.
Ancient Mariner,
Yeah,
and they get it wrong.
yeah, yeah,
And the reason they get it wrong is because what they're doing is they're conglomerating everybody else's errors.
yeah.
So if this website got it wrong and that website got it wrong and that website got it wrong, then AI is going to get it wrong because AI doesn't even have the common sense to say, well, can I crack open an 1874 version of the poem and
Ah,
actually read the original?
mm.
So the garbage in, garbage out of AI is always going to be a problem. And of course, the second aspect is, oh my God, the energy
Energy. Yeah.
required. And
Yeah.
it's the same thing. I
We
have
have
been
to do a space
railing,
on that. Just on the energy alone, maybe, and also the digital footprint.
I
Very
have been
interesting. Yeah.
railing about Bitcoin, how much energy your typical Bitcoin transaction requires. And it is essentially something in the realm of 1,100 kilowatt hours.
Oh my
Now, to
God.
put that in perspective, at a typical US rate of about a quarter per kilowatt hour, it costs $250 worth of energy every time somebody buys a Bitcoin from somebody else. Forget about actual transactions. If you sell bitcoins and buy bitcoins, $250 worth of energy, $250 worth of energy. So the cost of energy of Bitcoin mining, Bitcoin transactions is spectacular. It's unbelievable. And this guy was saying to me, well, what about the, he gave me this other one. I said, yeah, okay, wonderful. But
I've got a
why aren't people
conspiracy
using them?
theory. I've got a
Hmm?
conspiracy theory.
Oh,
The tech guys are in cahoots with the fossil fuel industry because AI has to be fueled by something, and they're
yeah.
turning their back on renewable energy, and it's going to be the fossil fuel industry that fuels the AI.
Yep.
I had a
Most
Anybody?
guy
likely.
a few I had a guy 2 years ago telling me that it was AI and Bitcoin that was driving renewable energy. And I said, how? He says, well, because we want cheap energy to run our Bitcoin mines, so we are adopting renewable energy. So I'm like, yeah, but that doesn't mean that you're adding more energy to the system than
Mm.
already exists. If you were to say, let's make 5 times as much energy and then sell that on the market, but you're not doing that. You're not looking to reduce total fossil fuel use. You're just looking to get your energy to be cheaper. So I'm arguing with these guys, and I am blocking them left and right because I reached the point where like you're just lying to me, you're lying to everybody. Stop all of this nonsense. And
even
the
even I, Sal, I went down. I mean, there was a time when I was kind of punting out there the idea that the oil companies could be induced into building renewables if they had this sexy Bitcoin that they could invest in through their carbon neutral activities. I'm kind of 95% over this idea now because I found not my idea. I found a better idea, which is buying oil and leaving it in the ground because it's going to be so much more valuable in 25, 30 years' time. So that's that's my
we're,
new fad, if you like.
we are still going to need lubricants. We
Yep,
are still
yep,
going to need
yep.
plastics. We are still going to need all of the unbelievable numbers of
Mm,
petrochemicals. Not
true.
not including the fabrics that go up in smoke if you even look at them the wrong way. But
I push
we're
this.
gonna
I push
still
it.
need.
I push the idea so hard. I mean, everywhere I go, because the idea of it being not burnt in the next 25 years is so seductive in itself. And the idea of it being worth, God knows what it will be worth down the line, when there's so much less of it, it's got to be incredibly valuable. So yeah, and for all these other uses as well, apart, if you like. So it's going to be a.
Uh,
So that's
It's
my new crush, if you like.
yeah, that's an interesting theory. It's kind of like having a savings account or
Not
something like
mine.
that.
It's not exactly. It's not mine. Not mine. It's not mine. I've completely taken it from these economists. You can look them up
uh,
if you like. They're very interesting. David Coe and Richard, I think something or other, Italian guy. Fascinating. You can, I'll put the link out there if you like, because that's their thing. That's what they're pushing. They're not stupid. It's nice to see economists doing something really worthwhile for the world.
I used to
Well,
work with a gentleman. He passed away only like 2 years ago. Who had family in Texas, and he would jokingly say that every morning my family wakes up and they look at the spot price of oil and they decide should we turn on the pumps today or should we turn on the pumps tomorrow? So there are a lot of people like that who
Yeah.
literally, do we leave it in the ground?
Yeah.
Yeah, it depends on what the price is today. If the price is inexpensive, hell, let's leave it in the ground. If the price goes up, yeah, let's pump it now.
But that's just oil. That's the trouble. That's the problem. As Sal's always said before, there's 200 or 300 years of coal out there. That's the one.
Uh,
That's the cruncher. Uh, and there's gas, of course, too. Or I shouldn't say gas. Methane. Methane.
well, I
So
also see like a huge problem with the world wanting more energy, demanding more energy, whether it be developing economies like India or because of tech industry created demand with AI
oh yeah.
happening at the exact same time as the climate crisis.
Yep.
We can't.
I'm going to rant. I'm going to briefly rant. I used to work with a gentleman who, Indian, living in the United States. I think he is still Indian. His wife, in terms of passport and nationality, but all of his kids are American, born and raised, that they have American passports. And he was so happy before Modi, he actually went to Modi came to New York and was doing a lot of rallies in New York, and he was so gung ho about him. But in the last was like 12 years, 13 years since Modi came into power, the Indian economy has not gone up. It's really been a poor economy. So, you would think in all that time, at least somebody would come up to challenge him, but we're not really seeing it in serious detail. Hopefully, somebody will, and in a more inclusive manner, because you can't just be Hindu only party. You have to embrace your entire nation. You've got so much talent and ability, and you're just literally locking people into, well, like what we're doing in the United States now. You're putting, we don't want to have DEI. So what does DEI really mean? It means that you're taking people who don't have a Harvard degree and who didn't weren't able to intern for a Fortune 100 company and giving them a shot. It's not just uh, only rich kids with good educations who came from rich families who were able to afford being an intern who are getting the good jobs. And by doing this whole anti DEI, you're just reducing the talent pool. That never helps anybody. That only makes it worse. You want to have the best possible people available to you, and you also don't want to have groupthink, which is another major problem when you get 50 guys who look exactly alike and are all wearing the same suit and tie, and none of them has the balls to come out and say, well, maybe that's not the best way to do things. So you end up in stagnation. And this whole concept of, well, they have to be a DEI hire because there's no chance that an African American woman could be that smart, or there's no way that anyone of any other designation other than white male Christian, Harvard and Yale could be that smart and could do the job.
Yeah, I mean, looking at the stage on, at the inauguration, you know, I was embarrassed, very embarrassed.
No need to be embarrassed.
I did though. I said, "Oh my goodness!" Like
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
guilty by you know, ethnic association or something like that. It's like,
No, no, not at all. No, these people are from some other planet. I don't know where they came in, but I mean, they're gangsters, aren't they? Mobsters, pure and simple. Theatrical, bad theatrical mobsters. End of the pier stuff.
I do remember
Hey,
reading
I
some.
just wanted to
Oh, hi,
comment on
Chrissy.
the. Oh, hurry up!
Yeah, Chrissy, please.
Yeah, I wanted to comment on DEI. It's more than just hiring practices. I want to make this very, very clear. So I used to be in the DEI department, even though I'm a data scientist, because my job is to help increase and diversify the types of activists that we bring into the organization. So of course it would make sense, right? And then how to collect that data in a way that was sensitized. So that's to kind of give you a context for why I was put in the DEI department. Plus, I think they just didn't know where to stick me. But that aside, what DEI is more than just, racial diversification of your hiring practices. It includes things like how to design a product that is responsive to different types of people. So, for example, when I do data presentations, I have to think about, oh, even though red typically means, not as good and green means good, right? That is not responsive for example, to someone with red, green color blindness, right? It includes things being able to also even though I'm a data scientist and I'm talking about p-values and I'm talking about, recall scores and accuracy, blah, blah, blah. These are concepts that someone without an education will not understand or without a data science education aspect. DEI is also about, it's really at the end of the day, it's about accessibility and meeting people where they're at because of the many different social groupings they're in. It includes things like, hey, are we collecting data on race in a way that makes sense, across our population, right? It includes things like, hey, how do we make this responsive, right, to someone who may have a disability, right? Or how do we get this message out that is attuned, right? The product is attuned to the local cultures there, right? So we could have benefited from DEI, for example, when we created the pill, contraception, right? Because many cultures don't use watches, right, to tell time. We could have benefited from a DEI perspective on this, or even the concept maybe, hey, maybe not all the burden of child, not having a baby, not having a fetus, right? Sorry, they're not a baby until they're out. Not having a fetus shouldn't be totally on the woman. You see what I'm saying? Like, this is what DEI asks us. It's more than just hiring practices. It's about respecting how we treat each other. And like what you were saying before, and in the climate ecology space, right? What y'all call quote unquote, waste reduction is like, economics for a lot of us, right? It's like trying to spend less money because we don't have the money, right? And thinking about those messaging, for example, like, yeah, I reused jars and stuff growing up and things of the sorts. It wasn't quote unquote to save the planet. It was because literally we were trying to just save our money because we have to go to college one day, right? It does include what you were saying about, I am one of those Ivy League educated working class Latinas, right? And I didn't even have a shot at those companies, despite my education, right? So DEI is also doing things like, hey, because this person doesn't know people in the company, right? Holy shit, she went to an Ivy League. You know what I'm saying? It's given me a second chance, a second look at my application. DEI is so much more than you think it is. It's things like, hey, with government, for example, which is supposed to be accessible to all, it's thinking about, hey, not everybody has the updated computer. Let's make sure that this website works on an Internet Explorer, right, that you might have to use at the library, right? It's about so much more than you think it is. It's about product design. It's about how you talk to each other in the workplace to facilitate collaboration. The part that people seem to forget, there's this inclusion part. So diversity means literally what you think it is, different types of people. But if they don't feel heard or as part of the organization, don't have the subjective feeling of being included, all this shit, it all goes to shit. right? And quite frankly, the most innovative organizations in our world today are those that are the most diverse and inclusive, because that's where innovation comes from. It's taking ideas from two different spots, three different spots, and recombining them in a way that's totally different, right? This is the
Uh,
sociologist me. So sorry to kind of go on a rant, but there's so much disinfo out there on DEI that I don't think people really understand what it means. And it really is important in the environmental space, by the way, right? You're going to go, you're thinking about making cars more cost effective and thinking about, well, if you think about it on the world stage, the majority of the world doesn't drive a car, right? That's what a DEI perspective would say. I just want to point that out. So why are we obsessed with the
oh,
car? You know what I'm saying? We would be asking ourselves, like, okay, but the majority of the world dealing with plastic waste, right? So I just want to point out that this is where there's a lot of misconceptions about DEI. And at the end of the day, it's saying, hey, the default is this: it's white, it's male, it's in Europe or in the Western world, in a typically a liberal democracy, right? Typically straight, cisgender, right, and a person without a disability, right, right, and that's what with an education and said, hey, there's more than that type of person out there. Like at my work, we've done DEI trainings on how we can ensure that introverts are included in the conversation and get more visibility, right? It's thinking that people need to be, it's about DEI. And the way we do it at work is idea, inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility. The way we think about it is meeting people where they're at because they are situated in multiple social groupings, right? And that's at the end of the day what idea is about. Because otherwise, if you don't intentionally think about it, you go back to the default. And I'm going to be honest with you, like, yeah, if you want to be a profitable organization, right, you've got to be responsive to many different types of audiences, period, right? And you got to be attuned and sensitized to those audience. And the problem is the people who's making the technologies, right, are not thinking like that. So of course they're going to think in terms of their default, right? I mean, you've heard all this online technology where they forced you to identify your gender online, right? Yeah, women get harassed on fucking online, right? If that was a female programmer, she'd be like, "Do we really need to know their gender?" You know what I'm saying? Or do we need to really put it displayed out there, right? And I'm just saying that's what I'm saying is that that's the problem with all of this, right? DEI understands that diversity is inherently good and even just as good as the inclusion of that diverse perspective in what you're doing in your work and outside of your work. Yeah.
the, the problem in my career was I worked most of my career for one large company, and it was the United Nations. And it was literally, to put it this way, I think that we've had as many as, the engineering department would go between like 7 and 11 people. And for most of that time, I was the only American born person in the engineering department. So it was all foreign. And I dealt with other parts of the company where, it was all every nationality. Women made up much of the technical staff in several of the applications. Almost the entire marketing division were women. So I got to experience a different aspect of it than many other people. So to me, it's like how can you possibly not appreciate how everybody can potentially have as much talent as anyone else, and it's terrible for your corporation or your country to ignore all of that talent base just because they don't seem to fit exactly what you look like.
Yeah, but it's more than but how you think, right? It's more than just what you look like, but how you think. And a truly more inclusive in an organization, they would be open to more different ways of thinking about the same problem, right? And it's usually related to your culture, your background, your subjective experience in the world. As much as you don't want to admit it, technology is socially and culturally shaped, right? It's shaped by the cultures who develop the product, the cultures receiving the product. It's socially shaped by those making the products, right? And I wanted to say that, yeah, you can have a really diverse working force, but y'all kind of end up creating this white male centric technology because everybody feels like they can't talk and say, hey, maybe we're biasing this type of group out by developing this technology in this certain way, right? So I do want to point out, right, that DEI is so much more than just quote unquote, giving someone a chance in a job, right? It's about saying, hey, at hiring, it's from hiring to your exit from a position that DEI is there for, right? It's about the type of products you shape. It's the type of communications you put out in the world. It's respecting DEI includes things like, hey, maybe this person with an English degree who went to a boot camp for a few weeks in data, whatever, could be hired on as a data engineer, right? Giving someone with a different kind of training a chance who might be reasonably able to do this, right, with a little bit more support, for example, right, and they can flourish. That's what DEI is essentially about, is that we're all coming from different spots and we're all trying to, and because we're all coming from different spots, we come from different ideas. And that's what I want to make
Uh,
very clear.
oh, you're preaching to the choir.
Yeah,
We
no, I am. I'm
uh,
just talking to everybody here. I'm just sick of people. You were saying before, because I was on Anonymous. I forgot that I was on Anonymous, by the way. You were saying before, well, it's giving that kid who didn't have a Harvard degree a chance. Yeah, but that's not the only thing. You know what I'm saying? I didn't want to be kind of rude about it. It's not the only thing that DEI is about, right? It's about even how you experience your organization, how the products you develop, how you put communications out, right? It's all of it. And that's where it's about shaping and it's about how you just fucking treat your coworkers. That they're just as smart as you are and just as good as you are, even though but they're maybe coming from a different type of intelligence, right? And a different type because of their social identities as well as their own personal qualities, right? And I just want to say I'm so sorry to kind of I know you're part of the choir, and apologies for that. I just was like, I'm tired of people focusing on just the hiring part. I'm saying? DEI is so much more than that. It's about it all. And it's so much more than about race or ethnicity or color, right? It's about how you're able to be yourself in the workplace that allows you to bring a new way of thinking about the world and what you're doing
I
and
I
how you
like
deliver the work.
I like what you're saying, Chrissy. I do think it's still an ideal in the workplace today, because I think, both consciously and subconsciously, we think and we value certain traits of people, and and also certain departments within companies value certain traits.
I
So it's
agree. I agree,
yeah,
but that doesn't mean, but everything's an ideal, right? You have this ideal technology, you have this ideal communications, right? You have this ideal way of doing things. Everything's an ideal. You know what I'm saying? And it's never going
right.
to, right? But it's about saying, hey, it's about taking
I
a
mean,
holistic, perspective on everything.
oh, absolutely. And I think, just like biodiversity in nature, biodiversity in humanity and in our culture is what will propel us forward and make us better. And we'll have richer lives and better connections, and life will be more fulfilling. And, I mean, I've grown up in a multicultural society. I think both Sal and I are lucky that we grew up in major metropolitan cities. I had from, probably grade one, people of color in my classroom, people from India, probably as of grade five, people from Korea, as well as recent European immigrants and stuff like that. But I can't remember what the point I was trying to make now, but anyways, I mean, I respect everything you're saying and I completely agree with you, but oh, I know, to bring the conversation back to AI, and I like what you were saying is how technology, we shape it, they shape it. But I would say most of, the technological innovations that have occurred at least since the 80s, and with the advent of the cell phone, it's been very much a top down white male, kind of Microsoft, IBM, technological revolution that's been occurring, and these technologies have been pushed down on us, just like AI is today. So that's what I'd like to put into the conversation. But thank you, Chrissy.
Let me just throw a quick couple of things in here. Um, it was part of my job, but part of my job was data analysis. And on Twitter, I'm exceedingly well known for my charts and my graphics and my scientific analysis of climate data. And what I learned was I'm not making charts anymore to be projected on a 18-foot large wall. I am now creating content for smartphones and for mobile tablets. And so I have to change the entire direction of everything that I had learned when I was working. Everything has to be big, easy to read, sharp color differentials, sharp contrast differentials, so that people can see it in low light levels or bright light levels. You have to design your output so that it's immediate. Bang! People can see and understand exactly what you're saying. And I do a lot of color simply because when I'm hiking in the middle of the morning before sunrise, I can pick and choose which charts I want to do for my arguments, by even though I can barely see them, because I remember what they look like, so I can say, okay, the one with green and yellow and that coloration, that is for this topic. This is so I it's you have to uh, you have to present for your audience, and that is the one thing again that because of I was very lucky. Again, I grew through a company that had extremely open practices. Most of the people I worked with were foreign born, came to the United States to make their fortune, men and women. The engineering department was the United Nations. The marketing department was. Management were people from all over the globe. I learned very young and very early that everybody has talent. We would do design review meetings where you would have 10 people screaming at a table and everybody's voice was listened to. You didn't have just and nobody was afraid. That was a great thing about my first and my greatest boss, in that as long as what you said had merit, as long as you followed the scientific method, as long as what you were presenting was easy to understand by everyone there, and you could back up what you were saying, that you would be listened to.
Have
I heard a ding. Okay,
Oh,
good.
are you there? Because you did go.
I, I I heard a ding earlier, and so I was like, did I just get cut off? What time is it?
I think
And
you
well, yeah,
did.
this is usually a little after the first cutoff. I typically
Sorry,
get
but
I
I
get
just
cut
wanted
off.
to explain what DEI was about. I'm like,
Sure.
people just don't seem to get that it's so much more than they think it is. And it's
Yes.
making me so mad and angry. And the worst thing about all of it is government is about being responsive to everybody, right? It doesn't have like a segment that they're focused on, like in a company, right? Like it has to be responsive to everybody, right? And that's the part that just makes me absolutely infuriated by this quote unquote hiatus on DEI folks in the world. And then especially at the Department of State and especially places where they got to go do international shit. Like this is gonna hurt their ability to have those cross, cultural discussions and understanding and U.S. aid and humanitarian. It's just making me so infuriated on so many levels. You know, we're gonna
One
hurt
one of the
ourselves.
minor
We're gonna hurt
one of the
ourselves.
minor notes we have frequently discussed here, why the car is not necessarily the best mode of transportation for many people. And I've mentioned many times that the electric motor scooter or the electric bicycle is taking over the world by storm, simply because you now have the ability to go 50 kilometers an hour for 3 or 4 thousand US dollars for a 30 or 40 kilometer range. And for 99% of the people in the world, especially working in cities, that's enough. So we are, by using electrical transportation technologies, we are democratizing transportation. Something, especially if it's like one of the really small scooters or bikes that you can actually carry up with you to a train or bus, and just and continue on your way. So yes, the car is not the only technology that these small uh, portable electronic mobility devices are going to revolutionize the quality of life in many places around the world.
I just want to throw out there, I was raised by a single mother. I took the TTC, the public transportation, for the first, 25 years of my life. I biked places, we walked. I took 3 buses to get to high school. And to get our Christmas tree when I was like 7 years old, I was helping my mother carry it for about probably 15 minutes on snowy sidewalks. So yeah, I do get that we are a little bit car focused. I live in the suburbs now. We don't really have a public transportation system, and I would really like to get an EV if I could afford one. So, but yeah, I totally get what you're saying. But also, we have a space, and these are the topics that we want to talk about.
Which reminds me, we're going to have to figure out next week's topic. Uh, how much longer are we going to be? How much more gas do we have in the tank for this week? Should
Um,
we start winding down?
yeah, I think so. Good idea.
Well, first things first is, does anybody have any questions? Does anybody have anything they want to talk about? Now's the time to raise hands. I think we may have reached our saturation point.
Julian has his hand up.
Uh,
Hello, Julian.
Hi. Yeah, I'm sure I have a question for Sal. I'm just trying to remember what it was. Or if I get it within the next 3 minutes, I'll come back.
what is the airspeed velocity of a sparrow?
I have no idea.
African or
That's
European?
that's a lot. I don't know. Yeah,
Oh, I do have some news about a.
that's a Monty Python joke.
Oh, is it?
Yeah,
Okay. I do have some news about a conservation project happening in California.
please.
Yeah? Okay. Well, there's a problem I'm sure a few of you have heard uh, of the wetlands disappearing, and because of that, the birds that depend on those wetlands are also disappearing. Wetland birds are the most critically endangered on the planet. And the farmland in California is taking over their habitat. Plus, sea level rise is also threatening where they live. So they've gotten quite creative. Actually, they're trying to use sandhill crane decoys. First of all, to get these birds to go to a different place to roost at night. And these are migratory birds that they just come to California. I think it's in the spring, and then again in the fall for the winter. They stay there. Um, they also like to forage for food close to where they roost at night. So it has to be somewhere along the California coast, Northern California, where they'll have both the foraging area and also the area where they nest at night. What they're doing, besides having decoys, which seem to be working, and they're luring them to, like, a broader habitat range, is they're asking farmers if during the time when they're migrating back to California, if they can flood their farm fields. And most of these are rice fields, and they do seem to be having some success. So it's like it's a little bit like assisted plant migration, but now we've got assisted bird habitat migration that people are, these are strategies that groups are using to help wildlife mitigate climate change. So I thought that was really interesting.
Sandhills are spectacular birds. They're about almost chest high. They only weigh about 5 pounds. They're beautiful birds. They have they're grassland birds and wetland birds, but during migration, they literally cover like 49 states except for Hawaii. So it is possible that pretty much at one time of the year or another, sandhills will be in your state. It may only be for a few days in April and in October, but they are spectacular birds, and they do breed. We have breeding sandhills in New York State at Montezuma, and I think they might have some of them in the Thousand Islands region of New York. And I wouldn't be surprised if they're in your part of Ontario, maybe a little north of you. They might be breeding.
Yeah, I think they are actually. That's right. Yeah, they are all over the place, and they apparently are some of the oldest birds. They're like 2.5 million years old.
Uh, oh God, when you start talking about bird cladistics, it's really crazy. But yeah, the cranes are they do go back about 55 million. The crane family, they are widespread. In the United States, of course, everybody knows you had the whooping cranes, which were almost shot to extinction. I think at one point they were in the uh, low teens in terms of total number of birds, and they were able to rebuild from that astronomically low number to there's a couple of thousand now. They're stable. Uh, they are very heavily protected. So at least that is one of the greatest conservation successes of all species of bird in North America. We always talk about how we brought the eagle back from severe trouble, and the least tern, the piping plovers, the osprey, but the cranes were so close to extinction. I think they're probably the greatest success story of North American birds surviving near extirpation. And with a lot of the North American birds, they were put in peril ah, because of fashion, because they were pretty and their feathers looked great on hats and on dresses. So we killed birds because they were attractive for clothing manufacturers. That nearly took out most of the really the large water birds, the herons, the egrets. Uh, yeah, that's it. The herons and egrets. We didn't have any peacocks in the United States. But it is nice to see that many of those species are coming back. Now, for the bad news, and it actually is quite bad, but we have seen declines in number in the last few years of several species of birds, and it is bird flu or salmonella or E. coli that they are getting either from feeding areas in farms, or they're getting it from. Oh, Robert, nice to see you. We're about to close. Uh, so they're because of all of these pathogens that are now being spread so easily, and because birds are in large proximity, the combination of wild and domesticated, uh, we are undergoing a population crash, and we're also going a population crash of insects, which is something that we've discussed in the past. So because insect populations are down and birds are transmitting illnesses to each other, I'm afraid of what the 2025 migration season is going to look like. I know I'm going to be out there every single day from about April 5th till about June 1st. And when I say every single day, I mean I will be out there birding every single day. But there are times when it becomes emotionally distressful, and especially when you go to Central Park and you start talking to the people from Cornell, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we've completely destroyed all of the habitat in the United States, and that's why we're seeing so few birds." Julian, have you remembered what you wanted to say yet?
Actually, yes.
Excellent.
Okay, it was a quick question. What could we do? Like, I know that ammonia manufacturing is like we can't avoid it. We have to use fossil fuels for it. Is there any alternative to the Haber-Bosch process that you know of?
Oh yes, I've heard that there should be able to almost an order of magnitude of energy reduction from Haber Bosch. When is it going to become commercially available? I don't know, but I'm hoping as soon as possible, because the amount of energy and the amount of methane released is spectacular. I do think that's up there in the near future. And there's other things where I mean, potash. We're coming to a potential situation where it's hard to imagine. We're running out of nitrogen fixation chemicals globally. And we were, for years, we were using, back to birds, we were using bird guano and bat guano as natural sources of potash and potassium. But we're burning through that, which is actually kind of a funny pun. So, yeah, we're going to have to find ways either of reducing the usage of these introduced chemicals, or we're going to have to go. I know that quite frequently on this space we are talking about regenerative farming, no-till farming. Jim, sure.
Yeah, I was just going to comment on Haber-Bosch. Uh, Actually, to the main way that ammonia is manufactured is currently is a two-step process. The first step is to make hydrogen, and the bulk of the hydrogen is made by what's called steam reforming of methane, and they do that using fossil methane, and that's the step that that releases the CO2. So if you use fossil methane, you put fossil CO2 into the air, and then Haber-Bosch is the step that you take the hydrogen and combine that with atmospheric nitrogen, and it's kind of a heavy, it's kind of a brute force process that also requires a lot of energy, and it would be nice to get that to a more energy efficient approach. But anyway, so backing up a little bit, you can eliminate that fossil CO2 release step by manufacturing your hydrogen through renewable electricity and running that through electrolysis process to make your hydrogen from water. So that gets you a bit a bit closer to a green process. But there's also research, active research, I think in the U.S. and Australia, on specialized electrolyzers that in one fell swoop go from water and atmospheric nitrogen to ammonia, and so progress is being made there, but it's they've got one process that is energy efficient but has low throughput, and they have another process that has high throughput but low energy efficiency. So anyway, more work's being done there, but there's been interest in that over in Australia and Japan. People working on a possible kind of supply chain where copious renewable energy in Australia could be used to produce ammonia and quite literally ship that to Japan to burn in to produce electricity. And I think Mitsubishi has an ammonia burning utility scale demo going. Thanks.
I'm going to just take 15 seconds, and I'm going to hand it to Chrissy. In the late 1990s, early 20s, when I was doing some research and I was investing in alternative, all the guys who were doing PEM fuel cells, the main source of the hydrogen was methane or even gasoline, which would be reformulated inside the vehicle. So the fact of the matter is that in the end run, it really wasn't that much cleaner. Chrissy, please.
Yeah, I have a question. So there is a person on this app, I'm not going to say names, who talks about regenerative farming a lot. And I
Yes.
haven't spent time looking it up, but is that a real thing? And I've heard others saying that it's not really evidence based and that it's not really all that much better. Anybody give me some insight into this and direct me to places to read? That's more for like an NPR audience.
Should we save that
Uh,
for next week, Sal? Or
well, yeah, sure. Ed comes here. Got his last name. It reminds me of a French cheese. Ed comes here
Oh,
quite frequently,
yeah,
and
bourgeois.
okay, bourgeois. And yes, he is the gentleman who does most of the discussion. And a long time ago, maybe almost 2 years ago, I did ask him about how if this was replicable, if there were actual studies, and he says that they do have actual data, and they are actually trying to use the scientific method to do reproducibility and do it from multiple sources and to have independent verification and validation. And I haven't read any of the papers, so I don't know if it's true or not. I'll take his word for it because he does really push that hard, and he seems to. But the question I always have is are we talking 5% more efficient, 25% more efficient, 50% more efficient? That's the part where obviously it gets a lot more complicated.
Yeah, and the only reason I'm asking because a lot of 95% of the spaces are full of disinfo and silliness. So I don't know because and I'm not gonna get into names. This is the same person who doesn't believe in vaccines. I'm always kind of you know what I'm saying? So I just want to point that out. So I wanted to ask you if you know anything about it. Can you send me to articles that are more for an NPR,
You know what?
audience, not
We're
for
going to
a
work on it this week.
scientific one? I'm not trying to be mean or try to discount anybody. You
Uh,
can be totally for the environment and not believe in vaccines. Like
uh,
that is totally a thing that could happen in the real world.
I,
I'm always kind of skeptical of anybody who's kind of who's weird about
I
vaccines.
haven't heard every space clearly. I haven't, but I will say that I have a website. It's called Evidence Based Science, and trust me, it's evidence based. I am probably, everybody here is always joking about it that if I do a chart or if I do a science explainer, and if I make even the slightest mistake, I complain about it myself, and I tell everybody, all right, sorry, on this panel over here, I goofed, and then I will explain what I did wrong, and I will correct it. Because, yeah, I do believe that it is so important, which is why you look at any of my work, you'll always see that I give direct links to the websites that Robert is laughing because he knows, because I give direct links. It used to be that I would do the links in my tweets, but now we are being punished. If your tweet uses links to remotes off X sites, then the algorithm will reduce your visibility. So I've always been, the most detailed. I want people to know exactly where I get my data from, and I want them to be able to verify it themselves and to see that I'm not making mistakes, or if I am making mistakes, to tell me where I make them. So frequently, what we will do, the people in the science-based community, is the first tweet you just do your introduction, and then the second the post on it, you start to list your sources, and you let and I always tell people, go to the original. Don't read a paper that is about a paper. Read the original paper, and don't look at the BBC websites or the Nature. Go to the Nature website. Go to the original source, and seek out. I know that not everybody can understand these complicated papers. I was lucky My wife was working on her degree, and she was working on some non-degree certifications. And so I would accompany her to the library, and I would go out there and I would read every scientific article in every single discipline I could. And even if I didn't understand 90% of what I was reading, I would at least try to figure out how this, works with what I know, and to broaden my scientific knowledge to get a little closer and a little better, which is why I can hold my own. I will admit I've been in conversations with with people who work in biology, and they completely blew me away. People think that people in the biomed field are just biologists or just doctors. Oh my God, these people know their physics, they know their chemistry, they are deep. So, yeah, Jim, and we need to get ready to go
Oh,
soon.
can I?
Oh, sure,
Sorry, one thing I would say, a great source of information about sustainable farming and regenerative agriculture is from the University of Guelph in Canada. They have amazing programs and amazing research. So if you want to know more about that, please check out the University of Guelph, which is
sure.
uoguelph.ca.
Push Canada. Go ahead.
Yeah, and one last thing, everybody. I know this is not, I know this is a climate-centric space, but a lot of our,
We drift.
just a little bit of mission drift here. But I just want to say, please, please say thank you to an immigrant today. Please give them a hug. Be grateful for the migrants who live in your life. And if you don't know anybody who's a migrant, take a moment of thoughts, or for those who are more religious, of prayer for, and gratitude for the migrants who pick our food, who clean our houses. It's getting really, really bad right now. I'm on the asylum team at work. It's way worse than we ever anticipated, and we do this for a living. We deal with authoritarian regimes all over the world, and I just want to say, please, everybody, just please, please, please say thank you to an immigrant today. Give them a hug. Reach out to check in on migrants, and their children. Everybody's really, really scared right now. And, and
Thank
then
you,
final
Chrissy.
thing is,
I hope that people would do that
yeah,
every
and I was about to
single day.
say,
I hope that people would treat
yeah,
other people like
yeah, but
that
I
every
wanted to,
day.
and I wanted to,
Absolutely.
and
Thank
think,
you
and we
very
just want to say
much.
last thing, climate refugees are going to be the largest categories of refugees anytime in the next few years. So thank you again.
One of these days, we're going to have to talk about the Syrian civil war, which the rebels actually won. And the Syrian civil war could possibly be considered the world's first climate war caused by the 5-year drought in Syria. So yeah, it's happening, and climate refugees are going to only expand in number, and it ain't getting better. It's only going to get worse.
And we're already setting,
Uh, uh,
and we're already seeing internal climate refugees, people not living in Florida and certain spots. I do want to say that we're already seeing internal migration. But I want to just say, everybody, please, you know, th- please, please, please keep this in mind as you think about your climate work. And I know this is not related to the topic, but it seems like you're a group of people who are really sensitive to different types of people. And as the granddaughter of undocumented migrants who worked in the farms in this country, and married to a Mexican migrant, I've never felt more scared or threatened than I do right now. You know, and now
you can't
I'm
really
working on the asylum team at work, and I've never felt more scared that I could become a target because of my work.
you can't really tell from the people who are here the names and address because you don't see it. But oh my God, are we an international group here? So this is we are literally the four corners of the square world, flat world. Jim, you had something in mind a few minutes ago.
Yeah, I, I just wanted to comment to Chrissy on the regenerative agriculture. I'm not from a farming background, but I have explored it through many different forms and technical articles and so on. But anyway, just to quickly summarize that, I'd say yes, it is real. Restoring soil health is very real, and has measurable benefits. For example, it can the greater water retention capacity of the soil can spell the difference between losing crops or having them outlive a drought. But on the other hand, I think some aspects have been oversold. But I think I'm willing to bear with a little bit of overselling. All in all, the whole regenerative agriculture movement I think is very important and isn't the whole story. There's other things, but I give it my thumbs up.
So it's at least
Thanks.
worth testing and experimenting with. It sounds like it's not like just a bunch of disinfo conspiracy crap. Okay, thank you.
Oh yeah, I believe in A/B experiments where side by side do conventional agriculture and regenerative techniques, and such side by side A/B experiments have been done. For example, well, I won't get into details, but I can give you references to you know decades worth of experiments. Thanks.
Thank you. I do appreciate it.
I think we have homework assignments for next week.
And again, it's because I don't trust 95% of these spaces are just full of disinfo and conspiracy crap. So I don't know what to believe. So thank you again.
I agree. I used to be a member of one that was, for the most part, nonsensical, and there were times I'm not going to, upset people here, but there were times when we were talking about UFOs and we were talking about extraterrestrial life and other things, and I was like, oh my God, what am I doing here? Uh, So, always vet your followers, people, and don't let people from Greenland listen to your spaces. That's that's a local joke. Some people who haven't experienced us or weren't here for the first few minutes will probably learn about soon. So I guess we're going to call it a close, seeing as I've been on for 3.5 hours almost, and I have to pick up my wife. So thank you all for coming. Thank you, Kim, for co-hosting. Thank you all of you for participating. It's always enjoyable. We love to have